Greetings, folks. Welcome back to the Jason Damico Show. This is a milestone in many respects. First off, this is the first in-person video podcast that we've shot in about 3 months. We don't know when this will be released, but this is kind of with the COVID regulations at this point in May, shutting down, or reopening rather. That's kind of what's going on here. And we spoke on the phone a few weeks ago about this, and it's like, yeah, man, we got to do this one in person. This just can't be through Zoom. So I'm glad that our guest pushed me to make that decision. His bio is incredible. I'm not going to read it all to you, and we'll just kind of do the top highlights here. Percussionist, drummer, multi-instrumentalist, educator, teacher, gold record holding producer, engineer, mixer, songwriter, and avid philosopher. If you guys know this name in the industry, if you're in the North Carolina region, Triangle region, he's done a lot. And besides all of this, he was my drum teacher from 1998 to 2008. And even beyond, because I came in for a couple of, cleanups once in a while. But he's worked with Corrosion of Conformity, Clay Aiken, Jim Chapin, Kenny Soul, and many, many others. And is, to me, a linchpin in the drumming community, 2112, and all the others in the North Carolina area. Please welcome to the show my good friend of a long freaking time, Mr. Merritt Partridge.
Man, thanks. I was tearing up there. That's a lot.
Damn.
Wow.
But it's so true, man. It's so true. Like, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, man. Thanks for asking, and thanks for agreeing to do it in person. It's awesome. Yeah.
22 years. I was 4. I was 5.
You were 4. Yeah.
4
years old. But your mom was insistent. Like, I wouldn't, back then I wouldn't, 4, I don't know, that's too young. Your mom was absolutely insistent. No, I think he can. And I said, okay, you bring him and I'll try it. We'll see if it works. So it worked.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I guess so. And I blame all of this on you. The 50 plus grand in the hole with gear, and it's all your fault.
Man, we can compare numbers. Like I can bring up how much in the hole in my home studio and in my attempt at I'm with you. It's the nature of the beast for sure.
And shout out to TJ Beachill. Yeah, because without you, the TJ Beachill connection never would have happened years ago.
And TJ, if you're watching this, it bothers me that you're not at Sweetwater anymore because I can't get a hold of you. He was the guy. To me, he was really good. Yeah. So you should call me. I'm not on Facebook.
Well, we got a lot of ground to cover. I mean, we're going to just see where this leads. I've got my usual bullet points.
Sure.
But as we discussed on the phone, on multiple 3-hour phone conversations over the years, our conversations meander, and I think regardless of which way they go, they're going to be pretty valuable for the younger audience, entertaining for the older audience, whatever. But beginning stages for you, I know your story pretty well, but just to kind of start with, your parents and the background with them, and I mean, starting out symphonically to a certain degree.
Oh, I didn't even know rock and roll existed until I was about 11. So that's probably, if you want the encapsulated beginning, that's the statement. I didn't know rock and roll existed until I was 11.
Wow.
So my father's a classical violist, professor at Indiana University, UNC Chapel Hill, principal violist in the North Carolina Symphony, 1976 to 2006, conducted the Triangle Youth Philharmonic. My mother's a strings teacher, conducted the Triangle Youth Symphony. Just the list goes on and on and on. If you look them up, there's a bunch of awards, right? So if people say, why'd you become a musician? I didn't really think about it. Kind of like if you're a carpenter and your dad's a carpenter, you just had hammers and nails and 2x4s around and you built stuff, you know? So it wasn't like, I don't have that story like I saw the Beatles on TV and I knew that's what I wanted to do, or anything like that. I suppose because I always assumed it was because they didn't want to hire a babysitter because musicians don't make a lot of money. My earliest memories are sitting in the front row of a concert hall with my brother, watching my dad perform with a symphony, with my mom teaching us concert etiquette, you know. So years later, when my 6th grade elementary school class went to the symphony, you know, and I was you know, enjoying music and listening, and they were going crazy. What the, you know, it's not, I didn't understand how it wasn't clear that this is, you know, something you should really appreciate. But
right.
So my grandfather, who I never knew, was a big deal in Boston classical music, and so that legacy was looming in the sense that when I went to Boston to visit my grandmother, there's piano here, and there's this, and there's all this history. So essentially, at some point, I don't know how old I was probably 6 or 7, the question came up, you know, what instrument do you want to play? And so, well, Dad plays the viola, I'll play the viola. So my only memory of that is, you know, being this tall and my dad being that tall and trying to make a sound, and not really, you know, it's, if you've ever tried a non-fretted instrument, it's hard to just
you gotta
make
get that
sound.
intonation, yeah.
So I don't know. The way I remember it is just that the pressure was just crushing. Not,
right.
I don't think it was because anything they were doing, just how I felt.
Right.
So I don't want to do that, you know. So my mother, around the 6th grade, was like, well, you have to take piano lessons. There's no negotiating. So I took piano lessons from Mrs. Valio, Cary Elementary, and hated it. Hated every second of it. Because I liked sitting on the piano in the house or at
playing around creatively.
Yeah, but I hated, you know, the lessons. Anyway, to make this a, you know, bullet point rather than a long story, the next year or something, the way you signed up for school band back then was that all the kids went to the library and there were lines. You could sign up for flute or saxophone or trumpet or whatever. Well, I don't know. I want to play the trumpet. So I got in the trumpet line. Well, you know, to play trumpet, embouchure is important, and I had crazy bad teeth and I didn't have braces yet. And I guess this probably isn't the case in today's society, but back then the music teacher had no problem, you know, looking at your teeth to make sure that you'd be able to actually play.
Wow.
It wasn't a judgmental thing. It was just, can this kid be successful at this?
Yeah.
Well, I saw that from the back of the line, and I was really embarrassed about my teeth. You know, my eye teeth were way up here, you know. I mean, braces were a godsend for me. So that, my buddy Steve Bickham I haven't seen him since, but if you're watching this, right, you were there. And so he and I were going to play trumpet, and I was like, I didn't tell him why, but I saw that the percussion line, there was nobody in it, which is the opposite of today, I'm sure. And I was like, hey, let's go in 6th grade, however I sounded back then. Hey, let's go play the drums, percussion. But to me, because I grew up around symphony musicians, and the other thing that's important to the story is my parents didn't listen to music at home, you know. So I don't have that story. My mom listened to this record, and that the reason is simply because if you play music for a living in that way, and you're they were constantly teaching all the time.
Yeah, it's a job.
Doing youth symphonies, you know, they came home, they didn't put on a record of, you know, anything, right?
It's like being in the studio, you know, you're mixing something for days or whatnot. Yeah. It's like the last thing you want to do is...
Exactly. When I was working in a studio as my main job, I listened to talk radio, and that's it.
That's it.
So I go over to the percussion line, sign up, and to me, percussion is timpani and bass drum, standing bass drum, upright concert bass drum. Pardon me. And so I go home and I signed up for percussion, and there's weird particles of connectivity that I don't know. I like to hear about in interviews, so I'll stick this in there. It turns out, hopefully people who are watching this know who Greg Gelb is. Is a brilliant jazz musician, conductor, and so on. He was my elementary school band director.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
But I didn't know, right, who that was, and he wasn't the Greg Gelb he is now then, right? He's still a great player. So, and he'll figure back into the story later, but so I go home, I signed up for drums. Okay, so I get the bell kit and the snare drum, and my father calls Ken Whitlow, who's one of the percussionists in the symphony, and he's driving me over to Ken Whitlow's house for drum lessons. And that was, Morris Goldenberg school, modern school for snare drum, practice pad. And, there's so many influences coming at you at that age. I didn't really have a thing like, I like this, punk rock or this or that. I couldn't have articulated it then, but it was just music. And is it good or is it not, So I went and took the lessons from, Ken Whitlow and did the school band with Greg Gelb. And the funniest, I guess I'm here to tell a story, I like telling stories, so I'll tell this story. So first band concert, and I remember this like it was yesterday, Cary Elementary in the auditorium. And the Steve Bickham was playing, I guess, mallets, and that left me to play a march, boom, bop, with bass drum, mallet, and a stick. So boom, bop, whatever. I don't remember what the tune was.
Right.
And I remember, I had stage fright so bad for so many years until I was in my 30s. And
whoa.
Oh yeah, just petrified.
Wow.
That didn't go away for a long time. So I'm sitting there and I'm playing this march, and I remember playing what I now know is that instead of playing on the downbeat, I played on the offbeat on the concert bass drum, so it created a syncopation. It says boom, bop, boom, bop. I tried to get or in the
Right.
And I remember hitting that and going, I made this horrific mistake, but that was incredible. Like, I didn't know why. I just knew that lit me up, man.
Right. Wow.
And I noticed that people in the audience who were my peers, who were the cool kids, because I was not a cool kid at all. I was a geeky kid with short hair and glasses and an eyes-out shirt, They were like, they heard it,
Wow.
So I cataloged that.
Wow.
Right. So that continues. And then I guess you could kind of make it simple by saying that two things kind of happened simultaneously, sort of. And that was that some of those cool kids, I started wanting to hang around with them, and I noticed they had these T-shirts that were like Ted Nugent, Kiss, right? And then around the same time, my dad bought me this boombox, right? So for those of you that don't know, if you grew up in the 80s, to have this box, it had two speakers in it and a cassette deck and a radio, which had a line that you turned a knob and it went across, a printed piece of paper or plastic that had radio stations, 88.1, 88.2, and so on. So I remember turning that on, and I was really into technology in the sense that how does that even work? Like they're playing a vinyl record somewhere or whatever, and that's somehow going across the air.
Right.
How does that work?
Right.
So I'm sitting there and I'm tuning the dial, and I hear all this crazy music. Like I never heard any of that. And basically the time period that is, it would have been ZZ Top, like Sharp Dressed Man, Phil Collins, Michael Jackson,
Like mid-'80s.
Def Leppard, Pyromania, that album,
yeah.
Billie Jean, or the Thriller, that
Thriller,
album, whatever,
okay.
whatever. I don't know what songs are on Thriller other than
Thriller.
So I said to my dad, "Where's the music?" And what do you mean? I said, "Where's the where's the music?" And he was like, "Oh," and he dialed in WUNC, and he put a piece of red tape on the face of the boombox, and then he dialed in WCPE and put a piece of red tape. So I, kind of this congruence or convergence rather of curiosity about technology, music, the whole world is opening up, and I thought, so you're telling me, I didn't say anything. This is what I remember feeling. I don't know what I thought. I remember feeling. So you're telling me that 88 point whatever is the end of the dial to 107 point whatever. Every single one of these has the potential to have music traveling across its, frequency. And there's only 2 stations that play this music. So, man, I was in my room every Sunday, I was supposed to be cleaning my room, trying stations, and I'd find it was like aliens landed.
Wow.
So, long story short, I discover there's all this music, and I discover that there's this guy named Casey Kasem, and he has this top 100, Casey Kasem in the top 100. And so I start listening to that every week religiously and writing down the top 100 songs in the country.
Wow.
I remember Def Leppard, DEAF LEOPARD, like Def Leppard. Yeah. ZZ Top, right? And then, of course, you figure out that you can put a cassette in and hit play and record, and you record all that stuff. So then there's a thing that, again, is ancient at this point, but the thing where you're becoming a teenager and there's girls and you got friends and you want your jean jacket and your Nike sneakers, right? And you want to go to the mall. You want your mom to drop you off, because there's no video games at home. And you're going to go to the arcade, you're going to hang out, and you're growing your hair long, and there's a record store. And to me, this gets into stuff we can talk about later, but to me, that's the biggest travesty of the way music is delivered now, is that there's no hunting.
So now the community aspect, it's there, but it's changed.
Yeah, there's a whole different thing when you go to the record store and you start flipping through records. So that happened, and so I start going to the mall and, Michael Jackson, right. So I buy Thriller. Def Leppard. DEF? Weird. Okay. LEPP.
Right.
And the album cover with the building and the Target and all that.
Yeah.
And then we used to buy records just, it's a cool album cover. I bet that sounds awesome, So I'm buying records, and that's the, Motley Crue's a new band, and Iron Maiden. So what that all means is that when I heard certain stuff, particularly Iron Maiden, and I know now, but I didn't know then, right? That what was happening is that I heard the virtuosity and the classical music influence in the guitar playing, and in the drumming and in the way it was put together. And also the fact that Maiden is, and I don't really even listen to that anymore, but it's a really important part of my story because they're telling stories, about these grand battles, and it's almost opera, right? If you think about it. And remember, I grew up, the North Carolina Symphony had a 9-month season. And so every summer my dad had to find another gig for 3 months. So we would move for 3 months and live somewhere else. So for a number of years, he played viola with the Santa Fe Opera, which is an opera house. So, outdoors with a cover and an amphitheater. And so I saw these grand productions, these operas, just because that's where I was. So certain things about Maiden, I think, really, I was like, man, that's really cool. So that became a drumming thing, right? So I wasn't hip to a lot of stuff. I was just going, there was nothing that I didn't know I was supposed to like something. I just liked it. And then bands like Motley Crue and other stuff, I think I just like because you're rebelling, and it's shout at the devil. I didn't see any of the underlying implications in what that might become later. That was just rebellious,
Right.
So there's all kinds of interesting little tidbits that I'll toss in that,
Sure.
like I would have friends at school who were, back then, man, this is all pre-grunge. So much focus was on, can you really play? Can you play? So I went to high school with a guy who could play, every Randy Rhoads solo on the, he was 17 years old. Brilliant.
Wow.
His name's Eric Kirkstein. Brilliant guitar player. And so he would come over to the house and, we'd just put the guitar amp, in the hallway. And I'd play drums and we'd just jam. And we'd play a snippet of a Metallica song. And that's a different Metallica than what you guys, the public, think of now. So my dad would hear that, and I remember one particular, this kind of encapsulates a lot of things, is that guy, Eric Kirkstein, my dad said, well, do you, and I don't know exactly how it went down, so I'm paraphrasing, but basically, well, a lot of that stuff you're doing is, classicals. Do you know about Paganini? And Eric's like, well, who's that? And my dad's like, oh, Paganini, the great, and if you look up Paganini, he's the first rock star, long hair and black top hat and a black stagecoach with black horses, and showed up late to his own concert. People thought he sold his soul to the devil, right? And brilliant virtuoso. So my dad goes and gets a vinyl record and makes a cassette copy of Paganini for this guy, Eric Kirkstein. There you go. So, but my dad, I would say, well, do you like what I'm doing? Now, that's only half the story, but I'll wrap that part up and we'll go to the other part. But would you like? My mother was the same way. Would you like it? And they would just be like, you know what? We don't understand the music you're playing. Like, no, we don't like it. We don't understand when we hear it. We don't relate to it.
Wow.
But if that's what you want to do, they were ultra supportive. And my brother too. I mean, he became phenomenal, brilliant guitar player, plays bass professionally, writes songs, plays drums a little, sings ass off, So they were extremely supportive, right? So then the other side of it is that my dad is conducting these youth symphonies, right? So Raleigh Youth Symphony Orchestra rehearsed at NC State, and I didn't audition. It was just like a Saturday morning, and my dad was like, all right, well, let's go. Come on. I mean, it's just like you're going fishing. And we fished and hunted and did all that stuff too, but just the same attitude, is get your boots, we're going to the lake. Well, grab your sticks, we're going.
Yeah.
So I go down and I'm in there with all these kids, and he's conducting, and I've got, I remember one time I was supposed to do play crash cymbals, and I dropped them on the floor. So I did that, and then that folded over into my dad was asked by a group of kids to conduct the Triangle Youth Philharmonic, which you can look that up. That blossomed into a really big deal, and he's done that for decades. He's recently retired. So that was a huge influence, is playing classical music. And then, I'm spanning lots of years here.
Sure.
So this is not in any particular order. This is a number of years. But a really important thing that happened is that my mother, this is early on, she said, well, do you want to go see Mr. Gelb's band? This is my elementary school band teacher. And I went, sure. And so she took me to some place. I don't have any idea. I think it was in Durham. And it was like a mall, and it was closed. But this club was open. And we went, and I remember walking past a music store and seeing these huge drum sets. Oh, I gotta have one of those, So it's before I had a drum set. So we go in this club, and I remember drinking these Soho sodas that, can't obviously drink, And Mr. Gelb had this jazz, I don't remember if it was a quartet or trio or quintet. I really don't remember, and I didn't know any of the tunes. But, man, it was just, really high, what I would perceive even now from my memory is just really high level bebop style playing. Mm-hmm. And I didn't understand it, but it was mind-blowing. And I was just, man, you can do that with a drum set? And Mr. Gelb, like, I'm used to him, and a 4, and a, 5-stroke roll, and he's, it's like the saxophone's on fire, So that happened. That was very, cataloged that. And around 1980, so I'll put this in order. So to move a little bit, Iron Maiden, now I think I was in 7th or 8th grade. I'm going to school, and I'm writing the names of bands on my shirt, my jacket, and the kids at school were like, so, which Led Zeppelin album is your favorite? I don't know what the hell that is. Led Zeppelin. So I'm like, I don't know, man. There's so many good ones. I'll let you know at the end of the day. So the rest of the day, I'm walking around going, hey, what's your favorite Led Zeppelin album? To other kids. And so the two answers I got were Physical Graffiti and Led Zeppelin 4.
Right.
So at the end of the day, I go to the kid who asked me this, and I say, well, Led Zeppelin 4 and Physical Graffiti, I can't pick just one, So, of course, then, hey, Mom, I got to go to the mall, right? And I buy these records, right? So I'm listening to Zeppelin and completely unaware. Like, it's so easy now. You look up, oh, that's a Robert Johnson song. Oh, that's this. You don't know.
Right.
You don't
The
know.
covers,
You're just taking it in. And I would sit after school for hours with a cassette Walkman and earbuds, which you had to crank. And I'd sit there and play along. I would take an entire Led Zeppelin record and play the entire thing and just pick if all I could do was go bap, 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 I would play that for the entire song. And I was just baffled because I had really good teachers for classical music.
Right.
But I didn't have a drum set teacher. That was my thing.
Right. Right.
And I would just sit and play these records over and over and over again. And, any drummer watching this, any student that watches this, everyone, when they come in the first time and they try and play hit the hi-hat and the bass together and then play an additional 16th note.
Limb Independence.
They just think that it's like the end of the world.
Right.
And I'm like, this is normal. No one can do this the first time. And that's because I remember it so well, just being, and I didn't know about Modern Drummer. There's no YouTube videos, so Ghost Notes,
Right.
I thought Bonham was playing all that stuff on the hi-hat. So I'm going, I didn't know there was a delay on the whatever,
Right.
So my dad, around 1984, I think it was 84, once again, he just says, now I'm growing my hair long and he's hearing what I'm listening to. And unbeknownst to me, I didn't know this about my father till years later. He's got this huge collection of Max Roach and Clifford Brown and Joe Morello and all these jazz records that he bought when they came out.
Wow.
Right? I didn't even know that. So around 1984, maybe 86, my dad says, once again, just, all right, well, we're going to go do this thing. So we go down to Wilson, to Fikey High School. And it was Buddy Rich.
Wow.
And maybe people know this, but a lot of tours he did, he played high school auditoriums and colleges. It was in the evening. And it was open to the public. You buy a ticket. So we go in. I don't know who Buddy Rich is. And I sit in the audience with my Led Zeppelin across the back of my Levi's jacket. And, not knowing till, 2 decades later that, Bonham was influenced by all that stuff more heavily than what we would have thought.
Yeah.
And I watched this concert. Now, I didn't comprehend it. I didn't know the tunes. I didn't know, whatever. I just knew that I was watching something incredible. It just, that I can remember, I can still see it, just thinking, God, you can do that? You can do that with a drum set?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
You can, and it's around the same time, again, this is all so ancient, I'll try and explain it like, YouTube, like Led Zeppelin had a film called Song Remains the Same, which today, you can find all this Zeppelin footage. That was it, man. Like you want to see Led Zeppelin and you can't see him. Bonham's dead. You're a teenager. So I had Song Remains the Same on VHS tape, and there's this whole sequence and this drum solo. So it's around the same time. So I'm epitomizing, Bonham. Around the same time, there was a music store down by the fairgrounds called A&M. We all used to go to. Great music store. Chris Jepson and Eric Collins were the drum guys there. They were important to me. I was a kid. How do you tune this? And Nico McBrain from Iron Maiden did a clinic. I got to see that. I got to meet him, see him play in person.
Wow.
So all those things, there's this classical thing going on. There's this, there's that. My parents were struggling with their marriage. They get divorced. They get back together. I'm trying to find musical direction and people I'm hanging out with. And it's the 80s, man. There's a lot of drinking going on. There's a lot of drugs going on at a way too young age. I mean, it's at any age, I think, now. But so that all kind of plays a part in, forming affiliations, playing with different people, trying to form bands. And because I was a little bit on the outside, meaning that I didn't quite have the same roots, like my dad didn't play me a Beatles record when I was 7, it was hard for me to find musical compatriots. So I got my license and I'd be driving around, because back then there's no cell phones, you drive to people's houses. Hey man, what's up? And I know where my friends are rehearsing. And I'm driving around and I'm trying to find a gig, and hey, can I jam with you guys? And I there was all kinds of shady stuff that happened back then with people trying to oust other people from bands.
Wow. And
I didn't want to be that guy.
Right.
So I'd go hang out, and then maybe go, that's awesome songs, guys. If your drummer ever has to move to another state, well, this guy named Paul Hendricks, who I jammed with, who I think is a band director now, he was like, man, there's this guy in Apex. He's looking for a drummer. This old guy. I mean, he was 30. We were 17, So I figured out how to get in touch with him. I don't know how I got his number, and I called him up and went over there and auditioned, and his little drum, took my drums over, and he's like, yeah, you want to play in my band. And it was called Arctic Wolf. It's the 80s, Arctic Wolf. So that was a big deal. And he had connections. And this is, again, nobody's going to remember this. Maybe people my age will. But like back then, the brewery, the Switch, the Fallout Shelter, like that, that was it. If you got a gig there. And the Switch especially, because the Switch was a major, it's on Paula Drive off Old Wake Forest, right behind the Mexican restaurant on this back street, right? All the cool bands, back then you put out a record, radio play, tour your butt off. So all these bands, maybe held, I don't know, I'm going to guess less than 1,000 people, maybe less than 700. Queensryche had played there,
Wow.
Guns N' Roses,
Wow.
all these bands. So, my first rock concert in a small club was seeing the band Bonham, which was Jason Bonham's band, right? They had this album out called Disregard of Timekeeping. And I saw Jason Bonham there because the dude whose band I was now in could get me in the club because he knew the owner, and I was 17 and I wasn't supposed to be in the club. Mm. So he had connections. We ended up putting a band together. My buddy who I had known in high school, Eric Kirkstein, joined the band. And that didn't last long, but we played at Switch.
Wow.
And that was it. Like, that was a huge...
Wow.
It doesn't seem... Today wouldn't be a big deal at all, but that was a pinnacle thing to be up there playing, and like my drums are set up on the same drum riser that Jason Bonham, And so I'll give honorable mention to people that were really important in relationships. Like Chris Hill had a band called Keisha Six, which became Champagne Society, and Win Britt, who we recently lost. He was in this band. I believe they were originally called Majesty, and then they were called Paris Red, and they maybe had another name. That's Dave Rose. Dave Rose.
Yep.
That was his band.
We had him on the show.
Right?
Yeah.
So we would do these, multi-band shows and play with Paris Red and Keisha Six, and Mark Anthony was playing in Keisha Six back then. Great drummer. So that was my focus. You know, it was like, I just want to play at this club. And as things go, man, politics, and this guy wants to do that, and this guy wants to do that, and this guy wants to do that. You know, there were divisions, and the band ended, and that band is of absolutely no significance whatsoever to the Raleigh history of the Raleigh music scene. It's the little spittle in a bucket.
Right.
But that was a formative thing. Like, oh, this is what this feels like, you know? And the other thing that was happening is that, you know, Chapel Hill was starting to rise, and that's this alternative thing.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different ethos. And I didn't like it at the time.
Cat's Cradle,
Yeah, like,
506.
you know, jangly sweaters, and
Yeah.
there's a certain amount of, forgive me, Chapel Hill, God, there's a certain amount of, it's kind of cool to not be able to play so good, which
Right.
wasn't my thing. And, you know, I can appreciate certain things like, I guess I was producing an album for a couple a while back, and they were of the age that they grew up in the 60s. And, you know, Bob Dylan, right? Unbelievable importance to the history of global music.
Right.
I don't think he sings very well, right? Sorry.
I agree. I mean,
And I said to this, but I can appreciate
Of course.
what he means and his lyricism. And I'd never thought of this before, so what they said was really informative to me. Is I said, well, why? What did, you know, we were talking between takes or something. I said, well, you guys, you know, your influences, and you grew up in the 60s, and Dylan, what's the big deal? Help me here. And they were like, oh, we never thought of him as a singer. No, he's a poet. He's a
Right.
social, you know, activist. He's, you know, and I went,
Right.
oh my God, right? If you
Right.
don't judge, so I can appreciate a lot of that. But the reason why that's important in my story is that I put all this effort into this momentum of playing well.
the craft.
And of course that's, you know, and people will put in comments or something, you know, of course that's all fettered and distorted by the fact that, you know, you're writing songs about chicks and drinking and whatever. So that, what the hell's that have to do with playing well, right? So I get it. But the point being that what on the ground, like boots on the ground, then you're in this scenario where, you know, you get this multi-band show and you show up and you got two bass drums and the sound guy's like, I don't have two bass drum mics. Like, it's a horrific thing that you have two bass. Like, it's not just that he doesn't have a mic, you know? So things begin to change. And then, of course, there's the piece to the puzzle, which is COC was doing their thing. And an absolutely brilliant, you know, Confessor. You know, Confessor is one of those monumental...
Was that Dick Hodgen?
Well, he recorded. That's such a great question
Because we just had him on.
He recorded these. So Stephen Shelton, right? The drummer, Confessor, unique. Nobody plays like that.
Yeah.
There's not. I mean, you can listen to Dennis Chambers or any of these great drummers that I love, but Stephen Shelton's like in this whole other realm of playing. So Dick Hodgen was, I guess, managing them, definitely recording them, and they released these 3-song demo tapes, right? And they have 3 songs, and then they put out another one, And so that was going on, right? And so I was soaking that in, and I think it was, I don't know, it was a house party somewhere off Blue Ridge Road. I saw Confessor in somebody's living room, and I mean, Dick Hodgen was an enigma to me, and I now know him and have known him for a long time. Had the privilege of work with him maybe twice, but back then he was a name on a cassette, you know, produced by Dick Hodgen, and I worked at this. One of my first jobs, you know, was washing cars at the car dealership, Helmold Ford, which was now where. There's a mall there now, but there was this bald dude standing out front of the dealership with this picket sign that said, Helmold Ford will not honor their promises, don't buy from them. And he was out there for like a week or so. And he was walking back and forth up and down the road. And I'd go into work with my little uniform, wash cars. This is before I was working in the music industry. Like, I was still trying to get a record deal. Wasn't making any money in music. And who's that guy? And I didn't like Helmholtz Ford either because I worked there and they were, typical bosses. Well, then the newspaper comes out and I'm reading the newspaper one day and it's that's Dick Hodgen. And it's really funny because that Confessor stuff, was so influential to me, just the uniqueness of it. And by then I was recording and 4-tracking and doing different things. So anybody who recorded and it sounded cool was interesting to me too. Mm-hmm. Early John Custer stuff, Dick Hodgen, Johnny Falzone, Mark Samaro, anybody that recorded, right? I was interested. Right. So I actually cut that out and, I made a photocopy of it. And what's really funny is that I took a piece of gear over to Yance to get fixed, I don't know, a year ago. And of course, you probably know, maybe the viewers know that Yance is in the same building as Osceola now, right? Right. And so I actually took that piece of paper and Yance is dicking around. And I was like, hey man, look, you check this out. told him the story. So that was all going on. And, but there's a certain thing that, I don't know, how crazy we want to get here, but I mean, I'll just be honest with and be discreet in terms of, naming names, but there's a whole continuum to that part of my life of maybe 18, 19, 20, 21 up to about 23 of struggling with the drug use part of what was going on. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just the truth. And part of what was going on is that in order to get yourself embedded, you talk about networking and social networking now, to get yourself embedded in certain scenes, I mean, you had to physically be there. And in certain scenes, there, this particular alcohol was popular, or these guys smoke weed, and these guys shoot dope in their arm. That was part of the continuum, and it destroyed bands, and it that's the dark side of it. So even though I was partying and doing what I was doing. And for you young students that are watching this, I'm being really discreet to let you guys know that that's not the way to go. And for the record, I have been sober for almost 25 years. So that's, so that that's clear that I'm including this part of the story to say that I don't think you can analyze all this music industry stuff and tell stories. Your interviews or anyone's that I watch online, I think there's a lot of stuff that gets left out of the story, that if people knew to just watch out for certain things, I think they could have a much more successful and empowering or authentic push at what they think it is they're going to get out of playing music for other human beings, because that stuff was not clear to me, that there's all these, what's that quote? The music industry is a deep, dark pit full of blah, 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 or good men die like dogs. You can find it on the internet. There's this quote. So that was part of the continuum, right? So what that means is that even though I was partying and participating in all that, there were certain dark corners that I just would approach as far as, man, I want to be around those guys and play those venues and be in that scene, and just getting around the periphery of it and realizing, and not that I was free of sin by any means at all, but just realizing there were places I hadn't gone yet that I just knew if I went over that edge, I wasn't coming back. And I didn't know that consciously. I just knew it. So certain scenes I wasn't involved in, right? And ironically enough, being in Corrosion of Conformity many years later, that was if you'd have told me at that age, you'll be the drummer in that band one day. You'll sit in Reed Mullins' drum chair, you out of your mind, not in a million years. Because they were an enigma, they were off touring with Metallica. They were our boys, but I didn't know them. I'd never been around them, not a day in my life, Right. So that's the beginnings, and that gets us to, the couple of years where I was like, okay, I don't want to work at Bunky's Car Wash anymore. I don't want to work at the oil change place. I don't want to dig ditches anymore. I want to work in the music industry, and I can't. Oh, and getting a record deal is this whole. Oh my God! It's not. It isn't. You make this good song and you get it played on KNC. KNC's back then. If you could go to NC State to their radio station WKNC and just get a song played, that I thought, well, people will hear it, and then somebody will hear it, and then this will happen, and then you get this deal, and dreams of arena tours and limousines with hot tubs in the back, and so thankfully I had watched my father for my entire life, get up and get his viola and go to rehearsal and earn a check. I'd watch him walk the picket line when the symphony would strike. I walked the picket line with him as a child. They went on strike for better wages. My mother, the same thing. They bust their asses. They taught from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. every Saturday and every Sunday, all day. Both of them, one downstairs, one upstairs.
Wow.
So
they made it work.
So me finding a place in myself where I'm analyzing the parts of interacting in the music industry that don't have anything to do with music, right? And starting to figure this out, I said, okay, I just want to work in the business. I don't care what it is, right? And you and I were talking earlier about Steve Bass, and he was a guy who back in the day, you would look in the News and Observer and the classified ads, which is what we did before Craigslist, and there was always an ad in there, PA systems and audio equipment available, and call this number. And the band I was in at the time, we called him up and hey, we want to buy a PA system. We actually met him at a storage thing with a roll-up door, and he sold us a, back then it was huge gear. He sold us a PA.
Right.
And that band, was coming to an end. That was after Arctic Wolf. That was this band we had with my brother and a dude named Tim Sutton and a guy named Jim Wolf, who I don't think they play music anymore, but it's a really good band. And we really had a go at let's do this and let's play this show and let's try and sell these cassette tapes and then take that money and make these T-shirts and do this, and maybe if we can do that, we can play 50 miles outside of our hometown. And we really that was what we were trying to do. Jim ended up joining the Army. Tim went back to school. My brother and I went our separate ways. He did his music thing. I did mine. So I said, okay, I just want to work in the business. And there's, if those guys are watching this, I know I'm not being accurate with the timeline. There's all kind of crossover here. I'm trying to make the interview take less than 4 days. So Tim Sutton and I were still in a band together when I was working for Steve Bass. He was a huge part of my story. He's a real smart dude. Working with him, setting up shows and doing consoles and front of house systems and monitor rigs was very enlightening. He's a really smart guy, and he used to build and install recording studios too. So I just want to work in the business. That's it. I don't really care. And right around that time, I hit a brick wall with my playing, and I said I can't. Everybody else liked it, and people asked for lessons, and I wouldn't give them because I didn't think that was something I was qualified to do. And I had always heard about this legendary guy named Kenny Soul. And I'd met him one time for 15 seconds. And I had figured out that the guy I knew in high school, his name was Jay Allred, a great drummer. Mm-hmm. He composed a drum duet for us to play at the talent shows. Great. He actually taught me a lot of stuff. Oh, yeah, he studied with Kenny Soul. All right, I'm going to call this guy up. So I call a dude up. Well, Steve Johnson had just, 2112 Percussion, Steve Johnson had just recruited Kenny Soul to be his drum teacher at 2112. It was a new store in Raleigh, and that kind of helped him legitimize the whole thing, Kenny Soul.
Yeah.
So I call him up and I'm, hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. I've been playing a long time. I'm a good player, blah, 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 blah. I need some help, man. he was like, I can help you. I was like, okay. So I drove out there, and we sat down in this room, and he said, okay, man, play this. And, well, okay, I played that, and he played this, and we jammed together, 90 seconds or something. He goes, all right, that's great. That's fine. And he got out the great book by George Lawrence Stone, Stick Control, and he sticks it on the music stand, and he stands beside me and play that. Okay, right, left, right, left, right, left. And Kenny, I don't know if I ever told you this story, but here we go. So what I'm thinking in the back of my head is, be out of your, like, no, come on, man, this is 6th grade. This is not what I'm here. I'm not paying for this, But I'm thinking this in the back of my head. But he's the dude. So I'm just going to do what he says and paying for the lesson.
Right.
And, so I play it, and he's all right, play the next one. All right, play the next one. All right, okay, great. All right, now play this bass drum pattern while you play that. It's something really simple, just like boom, boom, something basic. Mm-hmm. And so we go through a couple things, and he just, notches it up, and then I'm on. I don't really remember what the bass drum pattern was, but it was, for those of you that play out of this book, and for students that have the same exact experience, it was number 6. Right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left. A diddle in the middle. It just brought me to my knees. Just everything came to a grinding halt. And he just, but it wasn't like in any ways making fun of me. It was like the camaraderie, like, right? Like, yeah, that's what you're looking for, right?
Right.
That's that.
Right.
And it was electric. Oh my God. Oh, right. Because if you just play the diddle here, I'd never thought to do that. Which is why I'm adamant. I mean, you remember when you're studying with me, like, you will play these 13 exercises.
We started with syncopation. Still have the book in that room with the sun sticker you put on the guy's head. He's like, I remember that distinctly, and I must have been 6 or 7. Where do you want the sticker? I was like, I don't know, wherever you want to put it. He's like, all right, we're gonna put it over his head. We got to find that book. It's
Ted
over.
Reed. So that was incredibly formative, and then I studied with Kenny for, I don't know, months, maybe a year, I don't really remember, and I'm driving out there and doing my lesson and working for Steve Bass, and that's the part I left out, but to just real quick, we bought a PA from him, and then he helped us set it up and realized that we kind of understood how to plug stuff in, so he started hiring us to do PA systems and load-ins at clubs and just all kind of techie work, right? And then he figured out we knew how to use a hammer, so he'd hire us to help him. He got contracted to build recording studios. He built this great studio in Cary called ITM, which was Bob Blair. Burt Rogers worked there. Shout out to Burt Rogers. He taught me an incredible amount about recording when I was in my 20s. And so... Gosh, I'm trying to put so much in here. I lost my train of thought. So I'm driving out to take lessons from Kenny. I'm working for Steve Bass. I'm making money in the business, and I'm practicing all the time, And then, as I was mentioning to you off camera, there was a festival in downtown Cary. It's still there. It's called Lazy Days, and now it covers this huge amount of downtown Cary, and back then it was just the main downtown square. And it really bears mentioning that I grew up in Cary in the 70s, and that's when it was a little tiny town. It was not, Jordan Lake didn't exist. That lake was not, we're out here by Jordan Lake, right? The lake wasn't full of water.
I remember you told me this. You take the dirt bikes out before it was full. Yeah.
So, I mean, it was, by the time in the story we're at, it was full. But, So Cary was, RTP was growing. It was very different. It was like growing up in a small country town, right? There was a gun store downtown beside the grocery store. It's just normal. Go get supplies, go hunting, So I'm working at Lazy Days for Steve, wrapping cables. And, that's, if you want to be a musician, you want to play you want to work in the industry, like, learn how to properly wrap a cable. Like, this is, like, these things actually really matter. Learn how to do these things, and that's how I learned how to do it. So, go get yourself a job. Go talk to the guys who hire load-in crews for Walnut Creek or Coca Booth or Dave Clemmer, any of those guys, and get a job. It'll teach you a lot. And so, I'm wrapping a cable. And Steve Bass says, and it's, sweaty, just all day, August, stinky. Steve says, "Hey, this lady wants to talk to you." And what had happened was that Pam Mole, who was opening the Carey School of Music, she had come up to Steve, seeing that he was a music guy, and said, "Hey, I'm opening this music school." And she was a strings teacher in Wake County Public Schools, so that meant she knew my parents. But I did not know her by sight. So I go over. Steve says, "Hey, this lady wants to talk to you." And she had asked him if he knew any drummers that would give lessons. So I walked over, and she says, she's been talking to Steve, and she says, "Oh, are you Hugh and Marta's boy?" That's my parents, And I said, "Oh, yeah." And she says, "Well, I'm Pam Mole." And I recognize the name. And, "Oh, hi, how are you doing?" She says, "Well, I'm opening this music school. Would you like to give drum lessons?" And I thought, "Oh, you want to work in the industry?" "Yeah, I'd love to." So I start working for her. And that was the perfect, you talk about, God working in your life, coincidences,
timing,
the way things fall together. Studying with Kenny, working in the business, now I'm teaching, and it gives me this opportunity to go back and look at all that school band music and 5-stroke rolls and 9-stroke rolls and what back then was the 26 American drum rudiments, and now it's 40 PAS rudiments. It gives me a chance to ask Kenny, "Well, how do you do that? How do you do this?" And so that was a really important time, and that was also the next big leap in my career, which was that Kenny Soul's band got signed, a band called DAG. If y'all have never heard it, look it up. DAG, great band.
Oh, yeah.
They got signed to Columbia Records. He was going on tour. And unbeknownst to me, right, Steve Johnson, who owned 2112 Percussion, he said to Kenny, "Well, what you gonna do with your students? what? He didn't want him to leave the shop. What about your students?" And so Kenny,
God, I miss Steve, man.
So, me too, man. And so Kenny apparently said to Steve Johnson, apparently this is what I was, told after the fact. Apparently Kenny said, "Well, I'm gonna send a bunch of them to that guy Merritt. He's pretty good." And so I didn't know that, and I had gotten a phone call from Kenny saying, "Hey, man, you might want to drop by the shop and talk to Steve." Click, kind of. That's not exactly how it went down.
Right. But just a little hint.
And so Steve, then I get a phone call from Steve. "Hey, I need to talk to you. Come on up here." So I go up there and I walk in. He goes, "How you feel about teaching here?" Well, for those of you that didn't grow up in that time period, like there was no Guitar Center, and you giving lessons online wasn't a thing, and that was the grail, man.
2112,
to teach at a music store that was established in the area, particularly 2112. I mean, back then, you had that was it. So
maybe Harry's or something.
Sure, but they didn't have drums.
It was all guitar, yeah.
But absolutely to teach at Harry's, definitely. See, I don't know. I think Fat Sound was just starting out at that point in time. So, man, I myself and Robert Shy, another great player who's no longer in the industry, he moved on to other things, but he taught there and I taught there. And I mean, basically what I did is I had a sign-up sheet at the front, a yellow legal pad, free drum lessons. And people shopped there and signed their name, and I called them, and I gave hundreds of free drum lessons. Kenny sent me about 10 of his students that he thought I would do well with. So I had 10 students.
Right.
And then I was teaching at the Carey School of Music, which is where we met. Mm-hmm. And I was teaching at 2112, and I gave all these free lessons, and that became, the center of my career path, right? And it wasn't so much because, look, I didn't get into this industry to teach. I got into this industry to play, period. So when I got opportunities, but the caveat is that that's my ideological statement. But obviously at a certain age I went, okay, anything in the business will do, right? You gotta start somewhere.
Yeah.
But my original intention, right, was to play, right? Play original music. I think what most of us want to do.
Right.
Play our music for people and make an honest living, right?
Right.
So when I started teaching, obviously that moment of her offering me that job was a big deal. But there was a part of it like, God, it's not moving me towards playing. But okay, I'm going to do it.
The money's come in though to a certain degree.
But it was a money thing. But it was also like in the back of my mind, it was, there's no way this can just happen. Like, okay, I'm being provided opportunity here, and I didn't have any spiritual outlook in life at that point in my life, but there's still an air of like, yeah, okay, I'll go with this. But what I really thought was, if I like teaching and I feel like I'm making a difference and helping people and I get something out of it, I'll keep doing it. And if I don't, then I won't. Well, right. I did. I loved it, And part of it is that it gave me the opportunity to constantly practice, and to develop. And remember that I spent all these years trying to do this record deal thing and immersed in this industry that has a dark side. And I lost sight of a lot of personal development during those years, So all this stuff converges, right, at about age 23, where I'm teaching at the Carey School of Music. I don't think I was working for Steve anymore. And I'm teaching at 2112, and I go into a 12-step fellowship, and I get sober, right? And so 1995 becomes, there's a thing in 12-step fellowships that we're supposed to maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. And I've struggled with that. Like, if I was ever interviewed, would I say anything about that? I'm not really supposed to say anything about that. Well, I think at this point in history, I'm not naming any specifics. I'm just going to say it's what I did. And I'm saying that so that if anyone's attracted to the idea that they might need to do that, if there's anything in my story they relate to, that they might just Google 12-step fellowship. And I know some people think it's a cult and blah, 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 blah. But for me, it was the thing I needed. It changed my life. I still practice the principles that I was taught through that fellowship. So the center of my life becomes recovery, right? And now I have a community of people who've all been down that same road, and they're teaching me about acceptance, hope, prayer, and I had no religious perspective. It was just to have a higher power, really. It was all that mattered.
Right.
So that becomes the center of my existence for good reason, because I likely would not have ended up so great had I not walked into that fellowship. And to be clear, I didn't just walk in. That was a couple years of struggling, of figuring out that's where I needed to be. And there's a whole story to that. We're just going to leave that off camera, right? So I spent the next couple of months, the next 9 months, focusing on going to meetings, building connections, networking in that fellowship, and just practice. And what I found was the most magical thing. The more I dug inside myself and healed my own wounds, and my parents had divorced, and there's a whole story to that, the dysfunction of, families that don't work out in the long run. There's a whole story to that we can tell that people can, they have their own version of. And you make choices. I'm not blaming my parents or whatever. I'm just saying that there's a story that goes with that. And you have to find a way to heal the pieces of yourself that miss developmental milestones, because a lot of the parameters of you growing into the next mental phase and spiritual phase you were supposed to grow into didn't happen. So this most magical thing I found is that as I dug deeper inside myself, right, having some guidance through some spiritual principles, which I found in this fellowship, roadblocks in my playing that I now had the intellectual and the historical groundwork, the books I needed to get through, and I still couldn't break through them. As I dug deeper inside myself, all those roadblocks started, not all, I'm still working on roadblocks,
right?
but major roadblocks started to disintegrate.
Interesting. Interesting.
And so I began to realize that, like, for me, and no one has to believe this but me, for me, music, I don't give drum lessons. And that's not what I do. I give music lessons,
Yep.
If you want to bring a drum set, bring a drum set. You want to bring a guitar, bring a guitar. I'm not a great bass player, but I understand how to play the bass. I understand the theory behind it. Bring a bass. You want to sing? Not a great singer, but I understand how to help you find your voice. You want to study music theory? I do not play the piano, but I can show you around the piano. I mean, I give some little kids piano lessons. You want to play the sousaphone? Well, hell, bring one. I'll try and figure it out. It's a music lesson, So for me, the frequency or the harmony or the it's hard to explain this without drawing a diagram, but the interaction of harmonic structures inside of what we're expressing musically is reflective of what's going on inside us, and blockages in our own, if you will, harmonic structure due to the frequency of our emotions is what creates the pathways that we choose to take musically. And it's also what creates the roadblocks that stop us from getting to the places we want to go expressively, right? So that's the thing that began to become apparent to me at that time. So all of that means that I really got some traction. I got the right tires on the truck. I found the right groove. I'm practicing. I'm working on spiritual concepts, and for me that meant, man, I drove to Wilmington with a great old friend of mine and went to a Buddhist temple that she knew about, and I meditated with the monks, and I can't claim to be a Buddhist, but I tried to take that in. Like, what is this energy? I knew I had access to, through another friend, I had access to a guy who's a Swami, a reincarnated Swami, right? And I went and meditated and did the ash on the forehead and had a really incredible experience, and just started reading the Bible for the first time in my life, just exploring,
right.
Went to see churches. I read the Satanic Bible. I mean, I just started to take in everything, and just try to find the same as I would, like, Joe Morello studied with George Lawrence Stone, and so this book and that connection and that, that's why that pathway works that way. And when I play this that Bonham played, that's why it's connected to this, and then that goes all the way back to this, to Baby Dodds and the King Oliver in New Orleans, or whatever, right? Or my grandfather, some book that he wrote, So that's that period of time where that starts to solidify. And after about 9 months of just recovery, and keep in mind that what I just described is still happening to me. I mean, you and I have been discussing this off camera about religion, spirituality, the gospel of Jesus Christ, various ways that people think that manifests all forms of musical expression, and the pitfalls you have to navigate through the industry and trying to actually just make a living and be honest doing it, right? So that's still ongoing for me, right? And so, but at that formative early point, I just was going to meetings and realized that, man, I can't be out in these clubs, and try to stay sober. Right. And so it kind of became this thing where, like, if I can't play music and stay clean, then I'm just not going to play, And so I just trusted it. It just gave up the aggressive drive to go play all the time.
Wow.
So I'm teaching, I'm playing, and I'm recording, right? And this is the advent of 8-track, like DA88s and 8-ats, and I'm recording and I'm learning things and I'm teaching myself. I'm studying guitar with my brother, taught me the formative foundational things about guitar. I'm studying with guys like Mike Pitts and trying to understand. I mean, he came a little later, but just to give credit to people that really injected the knowledge I needed. And Scott Sawyer, way, way later. That's in the last decade. But I'm recording. I'm not just recording like trying to write a song. I'm trying to understand, how to make all this stuff work, right? and how to find what I want to say. And I found I had a lot of stuff to say that wasn't very positive. You know, it was really hard for me to write a beautiful song. Yeah. So about 9 months go by, and a buddy of mine, Whit Helton, he used to manage 2112. He had just left this band, and he said, "Hey, you're looking for a drummer, man. You'd be a good fit." And he knew my deal at the time, and I thought, "Yeah, okay, I'll give it a try. I'll go to the band practice, and if people are getting high, I'll just leave, you know." So I went, and in fact, the guitar player Jack Briggs, who now look him up. He makes incredible custom guitars. He's drinking some beers, and I think the bass player might have smoked a joint or something. But you know what? It didn't bother me. Like, wow. I'm good. I'm good. I'm here to play. And for me, music and playing had never. Drugs and playing. The only time I didn't get high when I was using is the day of show. Right? And I was like, yeah, I'm around this. It's cool. And I played with these guys. And that's the first time I got to work with Dick Hodgen. It was a band called Tread. And we recorded with them, and he produced that EP. And so that's the gateway right there that got me earning money hitting drums, was that the same time as that, Kelly Holland, who's no longer with us also, he and I believe Kenny Soul had mentioned my name to a great, brilliant guitar player named Larry Hutcherson, who is still with us, and he's really important in my path. He might not realize that, but they had mentioned to him, yeah, there's this young guy, if you need a drummer, and which was a big deal because he hired really good drummers like Kenny Soul.
Right.
So I get this phone call from Larry Hutcherson, and in today's Raleigh triangle music scene, nobody knows probably what any of this means, but at the time, oh, hey, yeah, and hey, I got a gig this weekend. Can you do it? Kenny Soul, Kelly Holland mentioned you could do a good job. What the hell do I say? Like, no. I didn't think I could do it. And so I said, okay, sure. I showed up at this gig in Beaufort, blues gig. It's all blues. I got to play with great bass players like Robert Kearns and Roger Gupton, and I couldn't play that stuff, man. He didn't tell you, he didn't have a set list. He didn't tell you a song title. He just started. Get that. I just went boom, bat. Oh, this is a shuffle. Oh, I can't do that. Crap. I just kept time, man. I didn't even play a shuffle. I just went ding, dot, ding, and the whole show, right?
Wow.
And I thought, no way Stu's going to hire me again. I just made a fool out of myself. But I just focused on,
kept time,
if you just keep
it.
That backbeat and play tastefully and watch him.
Yep.
And when he stops, you stop. And when he drops the guitar neck, and we played a show, and at the end of the show, we load out, and he writes me a check for $200. And I go, thank you, man. And he goes, hey, could I use you again next weekend?
Yeah.
So, man, I hustled my ass home.
And worked on some shuffles.
And I called Kenny Soul and said, hey, man, I need some help. And he said, okay, well, get your stick control and do this and do that and listen to this Allman Brothers record and practice like this and do that and play these triplets. And I just, all week, just
drawing.
And, man, and it came. It took about 2 days of practice, and all of a sudden, boom, it was there.
Yeah.
So I went the next weekend, and I played with him for a long time. And the funny thing is that those guys in Tread, they fired me because we were recording with Dick at the same time as that happened. And Tread was an original band. They were really good, trying to get a deal, playing once every month or two, and you're paying to play,
Yep.
And I finished my drum tracks, and working with Dick was fantastic. And I'm packing up, and I'm like, hey guys, so just so you know, I got this cover band gig, and like I'm going to be doing this, but it won't interfere. I can still do the gigs. And I'm like, okay. And I leave, and they're going to overdub all the other stuff. So I knew I wouldn't hear from them for whatever, a month or two. So time goes on, I don't hear from them. And this is back when you advertise your shows by walking around downtown and stapling flyers on, telephone poles. And I see this flyer, Tread at whatever club that weekend. And I was like,
wait, what?
I don't know about that. Yeah. Well, the day of the show, the singer calls me up, and he's like, "Hey, man, blah 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 blah," you know, and I'm like, "Man, I saw the flyer, just busted out. What's the deal?"
Yeah.
You know, they're like, "Well, we didn't think, you know, you got the cover band thing, and we just want a drummer that's our drummer." And you know, it was cool. I was like, "That's fine, man. You know, it's totally fine. I hope you got a good dude. I'd love to hear that record when it's done."
Yeah.
You know. So that's the egg that really cracked, that opened the door for me, because once I played with Larry Hutcherson at that time, if somebody heard your name and called you up and said, "Hey, I need a drummer for Saturday night, you know, can you do it?" And if you say, "Yeah, I play with Larry Hutcherson," you know, "Oh, okay."
Boom.
You know.
Done. Yeah.
So he I don't know if he ever, if you're watching this, I doubt that he would watch this, but that sequence of things, you know, changed my life, and it turned me into somebody who could. It's like what Buddy Rich said, you know, you shouldn't be a drummer. You shouldn't be a rock drummer. You should be a drummer. You should be able to play all the. Oh, wait, no, you should be a musician. You know, and you can take that one step further. It's one of my favorite quotes is Kenwood Denard. He said that, you know, you should be a human being first, musician second.
You taught me that at 10, 11.
Yeah, so it's human being first, musician second, instrumentalist third. And he pointed out that, you know, if any of those three things get out of order, if you put being a drummer in front of being a musician or whatever, if you put being a musician in front of being a human being, that's where all the problems, you can trace it back to that one thing.
Yeah.
Then, of course, you have to define your humanity, but that's not what we're here to do, right? But that's really important. And just to say, you know, there's so many great musicians that, you know, if you said, well, who are you influenced by? And you could go down this list, you know, like, for example, Kenwood Denard or Tony Williams. I read interviews with those guys more than I listen to what they play. Mm. You know, there's a certain thing that happens to me if I listen to somebody like Tony Williams. Like, I'll listen to a Tony Williams record, and there'll be a little piece in there that I'll go, man, that's like that thing. Like, I play that, like something similar. Of course, I don't play like Tony Williams, you know, but there'll be something in there, and I'll go, and I'll realize, like, man, I must be on the right track. Like, if I recognize that, you know, and then I'll think, I can't listen to this, because then I'm going to play that because I realized that he played it.
Right.
So I will restrict myself from listening to certain things, you know. So it ends up, right, if we then think about what I learned, that these roadblocks are internal and they come from thinking about myself or my relationship with God or all these various parameters, or my relationship with my parents, or my whatever issue is going on. At the end of the day, I'm actually a little bit more interested in how people think, right, and where they're coming from, right, and that would be the thing, is like to find the thing that influences you, and figure out what that person listened to, and then figure out what that person listened to, and so on and so on and so on. So, but anyway, that's where the egg got cracked into, like, oh man, I can make a living playing, and I became a jobber. You know, I became like, play this gig, I play that. I mean, I still did original music. I wasn't married yet. I didn't have a child, so there was a lot of free time. So I did original things. Had a great band with Shirlette Ammons called Stump that did an EP and got some, you know, college radio might have played it here and there. It was really good. I played guitar in that band. Had a band with Shane Gentry that was really cool. So there's other things in there, and that was, you know, but then that became, versatility became the name of the game, you know. And I realized that I love jazz, and I had played rock, and I had played, I had done, you know, Jesus Christ Superstar and Godspell and musicals and those types of things, and played church gigs. I could read, and my reading was resurrected once I started teaching, right? There was a gap there.
Right.
So all that was, okay, I can do that. I played classical music. Jazz. I love jazz. I didn't play it. Well, you know, once again, starting down that path, and I bought the Jim Chapin book, and started working out of that, and couldn't do it. Just baffling to me. Couldn't play it. And worked on it for a long time, and just could not get it to sound right. Well, Steve Johnson, and had an opportunity to hire Jim Chapin for a day to teach at 2112, and you could sign up for lessons. This is probably 97 or so, and I knew who he was, and I said, sign me up. And so I went to the lesson, and I wanted to learn about the jazz book, and I went into the lesson, and he had a practice pad and a suit and tie on, and that was it. And
that guy's gnarly, man.
And he said, well, young man, play something for me, like if your friends came over and you want to show off a little bit. And I played something on the pad, and he kind of went, it's pretty good, but you never really get anywhere like that. And I just,
right.
I went, this is it. This is the next grail. I found the freaking grail, man. Like I'm watching. I can still see it in front of my face. That's Buddy Rich. Like after I saw Buddy Rich in the '80s, my dad got me a VHS tape of Buddy Rich, and I would sit. For y'all that don't know, VHS.
I remember this story.
Tape, and you put it's a videotape, and you could take the remote and you could pause it, so you would see, and then you could frame advance it, and I would sit and frame advance pieces of what he was playing to try and figure out what do you have
Technique.
what do you have to do
Yep.
in here? How does that?
How's it translate?
I'm watching Jim Chapin, and this is it, And so he plays, and I go, man, okay, what do I need to do? And he, corrected. For those of y'all that don't know, the very truncated version is he studied with Sanford Moeller, and Moeller had traveled the country. He was just loved drumming. Was a marching, drummer, snare drummer. He had traveled the country and gone to VFW halls. This is before the drum set existed, and he had interviewed drummers all over the country. Who's the best drummer in this town? Play me a long roll. Play me some fast triplets. Play me this. Play me that. And he had examined all these various techniques and ways of having things work. And he realized that all these players had three things in common that some of them didn't even know they were doing. And that was what he called the whip stroke, the tap stroke, and the up. Now, there's way more to it than that. But that's the basic skeleton upon which all that is hung, right? So Jim was Sanford Moeller's star pupil. He was carrying the torch into the future. And he told me all these great stories. And he broke me down to, he's like a grandpa, he was stern, and it had to be exactly his way, but he was never cruel or mean in any way.
Right.
So he broke me down to ground zero. I took one lesson. I practiced for months. I went back.
Wow.
I practiced that one thing for months. And I had so much to unlearn. Even being a great player, I had other techniques I used that got in the way. None of those other techniques are bad. For those of y'all that know, like French, German, Moeller, traditional, they're all usable. I use them all. Everyone should learn all of them. You should study them individually so you understand the function of them, right? So I went back months later, Jason, and went in there and went, okay. And I didn't have it. I mean, nope, sorry, that's not it. Because you couldn't watch it on YouTube.
Right.
So I just kept going back and kept going back. What he was doing is he was leaving his house in New Jersey. He was driving a day. He was stopping and teaching at a little mom and pop store. Driving a day, teaching again. Driving a day, teaching again.
Little teaching tours, perhaps.
He was making his way across the country to go to the NAMM show, or to go to see the guys at DW where he was endorsed, or to go here, or to go there. Well, that meant that every few months I had the opportunity to sit down with him again. And sure enough, eventually he went, well, that's fantastic. You've got it. And so then we worked on the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. Well, really long story short, to just move on to the next phase, but to give proper credit to that massively powerful opportunity that I had. And I had colleagues that I was calling up going, do you want to take a Chapin lesson, man? Like, he's coming. And they go, nah, I don't really think that that's what I need. Okay. Yeah. That's how some people viewed it.
Wow.
I viewed it like, this is all I'm going to do. Just like when I study with Kenny, I'm going to figure out what this tool does, right? And so, and I love to tell this story, is a huge moment in my life. I studied and learned the way he wanted it to be. And then I prepared this snare drum solo, which was out of a book called The Rudimental Cookbook, and it's the solo called 7 and 6. And if you play it with some of the Moeller isms in the way you play it, instead of the more modern marching thing, which is fine. I'm not, slamming on that. That's great too. But if you angle it kind of in a Moeller way, it's a good solo to kind of express some of the things he taught if you can play it at the marked tempo, which is flying.
Yeah.
And I practiced. This is, quite some time went by, and I finally got to where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna learn this, and I'm gonna get it ready, and I'm gonna take it in and play it for him. So I take it in and play it for him, and I'm nervous, I'm shaking, and I do it, and I don't make a mistake. And he says, "Well, that was just marvelous. Well, what's that little thing you did there at the end?" And he's on to the next lesson. That's just marvelous. That's and it ends with a Swiss triplet. And what's that thing at the end there? The Swiss triplet. Let's talk about that. So we talk about it, and he shows me some stuff, and at the end of the lesson, he reaches in this like grocery bag, and he pulls out this stack of papers. Now, when you went to lessons with Chapin, he would teach you something, and then he would give you one piece of paper.
Wow.
Out of that bag, he would give you a piece of paper, and then you would leave. And that was how the lessons were. And it had the thing on it you worked on that day, the one concept. In that lesson, he reached in the bag, and he pulls out this stack, and he goes, take this to get some photocopies made of this. And I think he's just assigning me a job, because now he kind of remembers me. He still doesn't know my name, right? But he remembers me.
Yeah.
So I go, sure. How many copies would you like, Mr. Chapin? And he says, no, that's for you. That's everything I've ever written that's never been published. Just make yourself a copy.
Wow.
So I drive to Kinko's and make a copy, take it back. And that was huge, man.
Yeah.
Huge. And then this is a little bit of bragging, but the other thing that happened is that the next time I took a lesson from him, he would often run over. And what happened is that day that he was there, somebody was in there taking a lesson, and they didn't get to the final thing he wanted to teach him because he was running over. And one of the guys went in to say, "Mr. Chapin, your next lesson's been waiting." And Chapin said to the student, he said, get with the long-haired kid with the glasses. He knows the whole thing. He can show it to you. Just get with him. And that was me.
Wow.
And of course, when I heard that,
yeah, man.
So that happened, and the reason I'm inserting that into the story is that continuum now means that now I understand the fundamental reason he wrote the jazz book in the first place, because the only way he could have written that jazz book is the Moeller system's a very different way of looking at how your hands interact, and I won't try to explain it on a video interview without a drum set, but that's how he could write it. Like, there were things in that book that I thought were impossible, and he would say, "Oh, well, that's just da 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 da," and I'd go, "What?" He'd go, "Yeah, just play this rudiment. Now do this. Now do this."
Right.
And that led to conversations where he would say, "Oh, well, do you like Elvin Jones?" He goes, "Well, that's how he does this." And so that whole thing ends up meaning that now I can practice a jazz book.
Yeah.
And I met this guy named Christopher Thurston right around that time, who was a upright jazz player who was way into Eric Dolphy and Coltrane and all kinds of great stuff. And we just formed this alliance, mainly because we got to talking, and I was like, "Man, I need somebody to practice with." He was like, "I do too." So we would just get together and just boom, 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 boom. He'd just walk, and I would just play, and I would, "Oh, well, there's nobody else playing. I'll play. Now I can play tiki-ka. I can play some snare stuff, like a la Book One." That means that he was a consummate, like, "Let's go play. I'm going to get us a gig." And we played upright bass and drums, no amps.
Wow.
Just the two of us. And we'd open up for bands at the brewery on the floor. The bands are on the stage. We just on the floor.
Wow.
No mics, not
Yeah.
We played art galleries just all the time for free. And we just played all the time.
And it was just a routine.
And he decided that it should be called the Standard Combo. Well, I'll make that a short story. It's an important part of my story, but there's not a lot to tell. It's just it was basically improv. Maybe you might call it avant-garde, but it had a bebop heart, so think Monk, Thelonious Monk.
Oh,
right.
One of my favorites.
The heart of it, is that kind of thing. And we kept trying to find a third member, and so because it was so improvisational, we would just invite cats to come play with us at these improv sessions. We would have we played a lot of art galleries. Glenwood Blunt City Market was a lot different. It was a little more artsy, less urban, and we play down there a lot. And Freddie Green, if y'all don't know about the Street Genies, a great legendary saxophone player in Raleigh. You can hear him play downtown. Sometimes you hear the Fayetteville Street, you hear saxophone echoing off. I played with him during that time period. But one night, so we would have guys come out and they would watch us play, just the two of us, which is stressful, man. Normally in your drums and bass, there's a guy doing his thing. You're the whole show. So it was a good learning experience. And people would come in and put their horn down and stand and watch us for a while, and then we'd take a break, and then we'd talk, and would you want to play, and whatever. So one night we invite this guy out named Parrish Anderson, and I'm playing. You get into these continuum. You're just playing. It's just this continuum, right? Just this energy exchange, and all of a sudden, just whoo! He just walked in, took one look at us. I didn't even know he came in. Opened the case, got the horn, put it together, and just started. And man, that was my life musically for probably a couple years.
Wow.
Like that, no backbeat music, no cover band gigs. I mean, I was occasionally. And there's a huge part of this story I'm leaving out that I'll just tell the super short version of, which is that because of the connection with Kenny Soul and Steve Johnson and Kelly Holland, around 1998 or so, or maybe, I don't remember the year. I don't remember. No, it was earlier. I have no idea. I'm not even trying to name the year. I ended up in a band with Tommy Redd, who was the legendary songwriter from the legendary band Nantucket that most people probably don't remember anymore. That was a huge deal too. That led to we did rhythm and blues. Sam and Dave. He always used to say, "We don't play any song written after 1969." We did festivals and clubs and whatever. We played all the time. Great experience playing in a horn band. Had a guy who played Hammond organ, Greg Woods. Great experience. I learned so much trying to play that stuff. That's how I learned about Al Jackson Jr.
Yeah.
And really listening. That's how you. This is so subtle what you have to do to play that stuff and get it. And it turned me on to other players that this was the antithesis of Iron Maiden. The artistry's in a whole different way. Kenny Soul turned me on to Parliament Funkadelic. Same thing. The artistry's in a whole different area of playing. So the Tommy Redd thing was a big, huge deal, and that was probably the most important thing about knowing him was that. We did cover songs, and then he would play an original at the end of practice. One of the guys wanted to record his originals, and then when we actually did the session, the guy who was recording it kind of got a little preachy about, you should change this and you should do that with the song. Well, Tommy Redd's one of those guys that, man, just get out of the way.
Right.
Just play the song the way he wants. He already knows everything.
Right.
Well, I watched that. And I was recording some of my friends' bands and working at this studio that I'd built with Steve Bass. And it's interesting. He just messed up this whole thing. The energy just went all to hell. So I had this, DA-88. I had this 8-track recorder. So after that rehearsal, I pulled Tommy aside and I said, "Hey, man, you want to come over to my dad's house? I got this little shed in the back. Look, just come over and let's just record just you playing your guitar and singing a scratch vocal and the drums." And so I had one mic for the drums, one mic for the guitar amp, one vocal mic, and we just played a bunch of songs.
Yeah.
And literally we played one time through, and I just watched him like a hawk. And I'd been playing with him, so I kind of knew his mannerisms, and so we recorded all these drum tracks. Well, this was my first experience producing oh, I gotta kind of pull a fast one here. Like everyone's gonna want to say they wrote this song with him, but that's gonna ruin the songs. So what I did is I invited band members, just nonchalant as can be. And I wasn't trying to be a dictator. I just call up the bass player. Hey, so me and Tommy just recorded this thing. You want to come over and play some bass? Sure.
Right,
So he'd come over and
right.
he'd play bass, and then we got some keyboards on there. And of course, it was only 8 tracks. We had a 9-piece band, so that meant a lot of mixing, planning out how many tracks to do, bouncing it down to stereo, putting it back on a new tape, overdubbing the horns. It took a year. And that record, Soul Daddies, it's the only album I ever did that locally where you press records and then you ordered 5,000 CDs and you got 4,900 of them still in the closet. That's the only record I've ever produced locally that I have no copies left of. Like there's not a single one.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was an incredible experience, and that really taught me, like, oh, there's a kind of producing where there's always different versions. You get a band and you tell them what to do and you coach them and you do this. That's fine. That's a style. There's a thing where you write the songs for them. There's a thing where you do this. And then there's a thing where you just document.
That's it.
And that turned out to be what I was the best cut out to do. Was just to find people in their natural state. Now, eventually, like when I was in COC, me and Mike Dean produced a couple of demo songs, and they were used to having Custer around, and who's a brilliant producer. And he wasn't around, and Pepper Keenan, had a really hard time, like performing without what he was used to. And I was the new guy, and he was raging about, we need a producer and blah, blah. Well, I'd been producing. He didn't know that. I was nobody to him. He's famous, I was his drummer that was in his band now. And I guess Reed would have had a hell of a lot more punch because it's his band. I wasn't Reed.
Right, right.
I tried to honor Reed. We lost him this year too. And my take on that was that I had to be myself, but I had to play as a fan of the band. I had to try and figure out what honored what he
It's a tough
brought
position.
to that band.
Yeah.
But anyway, the producing part of it, Mike Dean, who's a brilliant engineer, really good at recording, produces too. He's over the Pro Tools, and Pepper Keenan's raising hell. And I said, all right, you want a producer? Let's go. Get behind the mic. And I just started, sing that again. That's not good enough. You're Pepper Keenan. What are you doing? So I guess my point is that I don't have any problem doing that.
Right.
But
you got to know what role to play.
So that leads us to, the whole I've got my jazz group, and I'm doing this R&B thing, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and I'm teaching. That's when I got a job working at Sonic Wave, which came about because of the Big Pun record that I have a gold record for. And just, for the record, I did not produce that album.
No pun intended.
I did not produce that album. I was an engineer.
Okay.
Right. And the story is that this is the true story. Big Pun was morbidly obese, a huge guy. And his record had gone platinum. He's from New York, and he had a platinum record. And the record label was like, man, you got to do another record right now. Well, they sent him to the Duke Weight Clinic, finest weight clinic in the world, apparently, to lose weight. So they said, well, we can't fly him back and forth easily. So let's find a studio in North Carolina that has the gear we want. Well, Mark Samaro was a smart guy, and he later had actually world-class gear like a Neve board and all that stuff, but he had good gear, and he had a 24-track 2-inch tape machine. He had the right stuff. And this is back when you look in a phone book, right? And you call people, and so apparently they called Mark, and we want to book a whole month. All they want to do is do vocals. They're going to bring the tapes with all the beats. It's 24-track tape, no Pro Tools.
Right.
So they book a month. He agrees to buy a couple things that they want, a Neve Mic Pre and a Neumann M149 and whatever. They come in, and they were the real deal, man. I mean, they were gangsters. I mean, they were actual gangsters, Latino hip-hop artists.
Wow.
And I've done hip hop stuff as a rapper in cover bands where they said, "You're the drummer, learn these lyrics." It wasn't hard to do, right? In terms of understanding the rhythmic flow for certain tunes. But then there are those pinnacle guys, like if you listen to a Big Pun record and you try and figure out how to get your mouth to do that,
it's a gift.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a gift.
And his level of word crafting,
right,
is through the roof. So what happened is that they're in there and they're gangstered out and, you know, partying or whatever. And Mark, I had rented Mark's studio as an outside producer, and he'd heard stuff I had done. He called me up, and this is the true story. He said, "Man, I'm having a really hard time being in here with these guys, and just the lifestyle thing." And I was sober, you know. And he said, "Man, do you think I could hire you to just come up and engineer and help the producer and just work with these guys? I gotta get them somebody that knows their way around the studio." And I saw the opportunity, you know, he'd pay me. And I was like, sure, yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah. So
I was up there for a month, you know, showing up, pushing buttons, making DAT tapes at the end of the day, burning CDs. So to be honest, right, I did some engineering work on there. But when you hear somebody's got a gold record, you know, how I earned that record is I stayed professional in an environment where I was an outsider, you know, and I had to earn those guys' respect.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Wasn't just like they were like, yeah, you're cool in our environment.
Yeah.
I had to keep my calm. I had to keep my cool. I had to not react to certain... There were some antagonizations related to my race being the... not the majority in that environment.
Right.
I had to give them pushback in the right places to earn respect.
Right.
And I had to show up. And the engineer producer that they had, he wanted some crazy stuff, like pieces of gear, like right now, because he was used to being in New York or LA.
Yeah.
And I would get in the car and drive around and call Steve. Hey, I need a SY88 sync card for a Tascam. Nobody in the whole freaking city's got one.
Wow.
So did I earn that gold record? Yes. Does that mean that when you listen to Big Pun, Yeah Baby, that you're hearing my engineering work? It does not mean that, because that's the big misconception in the business that,
sure,
you know, records are made, like major productions are made with executive producers and producers and writers and engineers and second engineers and tape ops and this guy and that guy and an editor and blah, 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 blah. So the reason I got the gold record is that when the record went gold, apparently, I didn't know this, Mark knew, you can apply for a gold record because it was done at your studio. Mm-hmm. So he was nice enough to get me one with my name on it. Well, you know, maybe, I don't know, in sometime in the previous decade, I had written down a list of goals. And one of the goals was I want a gold record, I want a platinum record. You know, now Dick was on, right? And I was talking to Dick about this, and he was like, yeah, it's nice to have my quintuple platinum. You know what I mean? So for Hootie. So what I'm saying is that, like, his involvement with that is a way different thing than my involvement with that. And that needs to be said, that, like, when you see people put on their website that they're this, do I use it as a tool? Yes, I do. Right. But does that mean that, and then that's even more funny, because for the next 2 years, every hip hop artist in the state wanted, once the word was out, it was top secret when he was there. Right. Once he left, the record came out. I mean, I worked with every hip hop artist in the state, and they all wanted to work with me. Wow. Now, I am a good engineer, right? Yeah, and I do know my way around a Neve console. And that's, those of you that are gearheads may find this fascinating, that we had a CAD console at the time. And I remember very specifically the producer / engineer that Big Pun brought with him. They called him Soundboy. He would say, geez, at least you could have a basic SSL or a Neve or something with some automation or something, you know? Could at least have an API with some automation or something, you know? And that was it. Like, when they left, man, Mark was like, man, we're going full bore, dude. And he got a Neve 8108 with automation, and he, you know, 56 inputs. Yeah. And he bought, you know, a pair of M149s, you know, just real sexy gear. So that meant that I did all this hip hop for a really long time, and a lot of that was on tape. I mean, those sessions are real.
It's like the Biggie Smalls era and beyond.
Totally, man.
That yeah.
So that kind of gets us to the highlights, the COC thing. If people want to know, I got a phone call from Pee Wee Watson, who was a bass player in Nantucket and the brilliant
Pee Wee well
bass player in PKM.
Played in church together. I was
Great
like
guy,
10.
Amazing, right? And if y'all know Pee Wee, you'll know this, son. Right? So he calls me up and says, son, because he had hired me to play drums a few times, which was an honor because again he only hired heavyweight dudes, and I was a young guy at the time. But son, and so apparently Mike Dean had been in Harry's talking about they were looking for a drummer because Reed was leaving or had back problems or had started a new band. I'm not really sure the actual truth of whatever the reason was, but he says, you ought to call this guy Merritt Partridge, So he had recommended me. So he calls me up, son, I just recommended you this gig. You gotta go buy the CD and learn all the songs. So I did. I bought the CD, America's Volume Dealer, learned all the songs, and never got a phone call. A year goes by. I get a phone call one night. I lived off Martin Street near where Osceola used to be. If any of y'all know where it used to be, down by the railroad tracks. And my brother, he knew somebody who knew somebody, and he called me up and he said, man, COC is in Osceola right now mixing a live record. They just got off tour. You live 3 blocks from there. And I went, great, click.
Wow.
And I walked down there.
Wow.
And I stood in the parking lot. And I'd recorded at Osceola a few times, but I wasn't going to walk in. It's the middle of the night, Stood in the parking lot. And I don't know any of those guys. I mean, I'd met Woody in passing like once.
Was this when Ian was still there, or was it just...
I think this is before Ian. I think this is before Dick.
Before Dick.
Yeah, I think this is when... I think the guy's name was Reynolds. Gardner Reynolds, I think.
Yeah.
So I stand in the parking lot, and here comes Mike Dean, and so he comes walking across to his car, and I walk right up to him, and he's, No. And I'm like, hey, man, my name's Merritt Partridge. I'm the guy that Pee Wee Watson recommended for your band last year. I just heard you were in here mixing. I'm not going to say how, but look, man, I really want that gig. I'm a fan of the band. I learned all the songs. It's a chance for me to meet you and put my name in the hat. Here I am,
Wow.
And he was like, all right, man. He was totally cool. He's like, thanks for stopping by. Cool. It's good to meet you. Blah, 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 blah. And here's my number. He's like, we got this guy we're touring with. It's our buddy. We're good. But thank you, man. He's real gracious. Give him my number. Go home. About a year after that.
Wow.
I get a phone call.
Wow.
Hey, Merritt, it's Mike Dean. And Pepper Keenan was on tour with Down. Mm-hmm. Woody was off doing I don't know, he's probably remodeling a house or something. People don't know. He's like an epic, he's got a farm now. He's an epic house remodeling type of dude. But anyway, he calls me up. He's like, man, I'm down here at the rehearsal space. I'm like all by myself. I'm hanging out. I got, you want to come down and jam, record, and see, we're both Pro Tools nerds. And Pro Tools was the new deal, right? That was it, right? This is Digi 001 is just come out.
Right.
So Mike was moving from an Akai 12-track, all-in-one to Pro Tools. And I was working at Sonic Wave, so I was working on an early Mix Plus, full-blown.
Right.
So, man, the two of us in a room together, we jam and record and trade knowledge and geek out on, gear and new pre's. And so anyway, he had a bunch of songs. His wife, Sue, she plays really, really good guitar, and I guess her influence had caused him to learn some real bluesy sounding stuff. So anyway, we recorded a bunch of songs that he had written, some of which were old traditional blues songs done real heavy. And that turned into a band called Let Loans, which was me, Mike, and what happened was that he was trying to find a guitar player, and we auditioned guitar players, and he never quite found anybody that he liked, so he called Woody. So there I am, and I'm playing with Woody and Mike, and we have this band. So we do an EP. We meet with the record label people. They say, well, this is great. We really like it, but, we're where's the COC? Where's Pepper? And so nothing ever materialized out of that. We played maybe 2 shows. Played at Lincoln or something. And all of a sudden, Pepper Keenan appears in town, and he's ready to do some recording. And Mike and Woody are like, hey, we're jamming with this dude. He's great, you want to jam with him? Sure. So we play, and he goes, great, you're the drummer. So anyway, there's a lot to that story that I'll leave off camera because it's just really complicated. But the long story short is that we wrote a bunch of tunes. We recorded. Mike and I produced a couple things. Let's see. The only thing you can find that you can actually hear is called "It Is That Way." It was on a High Times compilation. There's a couple other things. Some of those songs ended up on the next record.
They got a Skinnerd cover that's on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm on that. That's the one thing that was released that I'm on. So anyway, one thing led to another, and at the end of the day, man, I'll be honest without going into too much detail, but Pepper Keenan and I were just never gonna get along, see eye to eye on the way things should be done or the kind of the root of where things should be. And man, I wanted that gig so bad. To just do one album and one tour. Yeah. And I just reached this moment where we were doing pre-production for this album, and I was like, man, I have to leave. I can't. Like, this is a bad path for me to go down. Not because of the band, but specifically my relationship with him. Just, we were never going to see eye to eye on core issues. So man, I waltzed into band practice that Monday night and said, fellas, I'm done. I'm out. And I directly said to Pepper, I said, look, man, you and I are just never going to get along. And I'm going to leave so you can find somebody else before we get too far down this path. And I told Mike and Woody, it's an honor, privilege. I enjoyed playing with you guys and appreciate the privilege of being in the band, and Woody was like, man, thanks for having the balls to come tell us to our face. It's cool, man. It's all good. It's all good. And they were totally gracious about it. And then they hired me to just do rough drum tracks for everything we'd been rehearsing for the rest of the week. Just, they paid me just like I was doing a cover band gig. We just negotiated a price. Right. So I played all these tracks, and what's really funny is that this doesn't matter. This isn't a bragging thing. It's just these are the things that happen in the music industry. There's a song, Stonebreakers, and and I thought, man, wouldn't it be cool to start this with the blues? And then it cruises along for a while. So I contributed that idea, right? And so I leave the band, and they hire Stanton Moore, right? Because Pepper's from New Orleans. He has some associations with Stanton. Stanton's brilliant. I don't know him. I've never met him.
Met him once.
He played great on the record.
Awesome, yeah.
It's awesome. So I'm out, and I, at the time, had joined a cover band called Rubber Band, which played weddings and high school proms and sororities and blah, blah, blah. And that became my main moneymaker for the next 15 years after that. So that was the same time that was happening. I get this cover band. I'm in COC. This isn't working out. I've been in COC in some form or another for a year. I'm not making any money. It's an original band. And, those guys have their own way of doing things. I thought, man, let's learn a 45-minute set and play like Richmond. And then let's play like, Jacksonville, Florida. And just go out on the weekend and play. People would come, and that's just not their vision. Right. They want to do a record and a tour. Right. So I joined this cover band, and I stayed in that band 15 years. And that was my, my bread and butter. But so I'm leaving COC. So I'm doing this cover band thing. I'm teaching. I'm doing some recording. My jazz thing was still in the air. But man, any jazz musician will tell you, straight ahead playing and backbeats and parties is what pays your bills. Yep. Yep. So I'm paying bills. That's what I'm doing. I'm paying bills. And I'm enjoying it. I mean, I'm at least blessed enough to get into musical situations that have enough room for improvisation, enough room for wiggle that they're fun and the people are good. And it really helps when you're in bands with people who are also dependent on those gigs for their income. Like that's crucial to have, because it's just to have coherency, right? So COC goes off, they do their record, and a guy who's highly influential to me and is a friend of mine named Jason Patterson, who don't know about, you should check him out. I used to practice along to the Cry Love record religiously before I knew him. And he calls me up and he says, hey man, so I'm touring with COC. Right? So I did the demo, Stanton did the record, Jason's doing the tour. And he says, I said, okay, well, great. And he says, well, man, there's some crazy stuff on this record that Stanton played. Do you have recordings of what you played? I just want to hear what your take was on it. And I'm like, yeah, I've got a couple demo things. Come on over. So he comes over to my little studio. Mm-hmm. And I put the record in this new pre-release CDs, people. No Spotify, right? Put in the pre-release CD. Bap, boom, boom, boom. God. Oh, this is my thing. That was the thing I contributed to the whole record starts with that, So I don't care. It's fine. But the reason I'm telling the story is that that's such a common thing, that you just never know what thing you stick out there ends up being this other thing, But anyway, Jason, I never went and saw the band. I was, it's a little kind of didn't want to immerse myself in their world at all. I never went and saw them with Jason or Stanton, but from what I understand, he did a brilliant job on that tour. So that gets us up to, there's other stuff in there. I did some big band gigs, which was incredibly gratifying. I loved it, and I wish I could have done more of that. There's just other stuff in there, but I had a little bit of success selling some songs, publishing things here and there. So that gets us up to, the basically to the modern phase of my life. And, there's I'm sure if you have other questions, there's things I'll probably go back to for answers. But, I kind of glossed over Rubber Band because I guess people often want to know. I mean,
you're hitting all the bullet points. I don't really have to ask any questions because it's just.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk.
We always said it was going to be a documentation because you're like not even on the internet.
No,
and no, just having you here is amazing to have.
Well, as you know, that's why I agreed to do it. As you made the valid point that maybe some of this stuff would be good if it were preserved.
I mean, at least if we have it, and now we've got it.
Well, I always got some. I don't, as I said off camera, like I don't see the relevance of my stories very much, but I do like telling stories. It is, and that is what's music at the end of the day is a communication and storytelling.
And you've impacted so many people. I mean, thousands of students and people.
That's true, actually. I mean, I don't often think of it that way, but that's true. So I kind of glossed over Rubber Band, but just to say, and if those guys are watching this, Chuck Folds, who if y'all don't know about him, look him up on the internet. Really smart band leader. I mean, kept that band running 20 years, kept us working 100, 120, 150 shows a year in, year. I mean, some years were less, not 90 shows. Kept us working, had a good relationship with East Coast Entertainment, Barry Herndon, all these really important people to all the cogs that turn all these wheels. And, the reason that band ended, the singer died. And we just couldn't replace him. His name was Tiger Butler. And he, that's I could talk for days about it, but the long and short of it is that being in a band with a singer of that caliber, not just that, and this is why, forgive me if anyone finds this, rough, but I hate, singing shows because whether or not you can sing, it's like this much the equation, standing behind a guy like Tiger Butler. It's how you work a room, how you relate to people, how you read the audience, how we never use a set list. I mean, he just picked the next song and call. He'd sing the title of the next song in the song. And now we're going to play, just brilliant, right?
Wow.
Night after
just
night.
Real showman.
night after night. No, we haven't eaten. I mean, literally, dude, we drive, all night. And I mean, many musicians that are watching this
can relate.
They know, right?
Yep.
You're tired, you're grumpy, you're furious. The guitar player pissed you off, and you got to get there and do it.
That's right.
And you got to put everything you got into supporting this guy, this singer, because he's the only face that the audience sees. So working with him cannot be overstated. And then, Chuck, he's the guy that masterminded. If I put this guy and I hire this drummer and I do this and I manipulate this piece and I put it here. So, Chuck's still playing. He's got a great children's music band called Big Bang Boom with his partner, Steve Willard. He's got a ton of cool things that he's done. I won't spend a lot of time talking about that in the sense that, you asked me to come talk about my stuff, but people should look him up. You should be aware. He's got a lot to offer, and he's a career musician. I mean, that's what he does. It's not like I think with the downturn and rubber band and cover band gigs in general and COVID, he's certainly got to be earning a living doing something else at the moment. And then, Steve Willard, who was in rubber band, a brilliant songwriter, wrote songs for Kentucky Derby, Ohio State University. They all had stuff going on. John Siegel, one of the guitar players, he drove a delivery truck, but he's one of those guys that's a chord genius. He's just professional quality musician.
Right. Right.
So that was a huge part of my life, is driving around, the Southeast, sometimes out to the Midwest or to the West Coast, playing with those guys year in and year out from 2004 to 2019, And so right in the middle of that, my son is born. And so that's the big crossover to,
now.
the life I have now.
Yeah.
So that changes things dramatically. Like, soon as I found out we were having a child, I closed the recording studio that I had, which you're talking about the $50,000,
Right.
I had about 75 in the hole, This is why I said when I looked at your rig, you should show the people a screenshot of your rig right now. Same thing, the Pro Tools and Avalon VT737 and some Longevin stuff and, some Studer stuff. It's the same thing, just you build up that magic.
Dick Hodgins still got a Studer.
Yeah. Well, Dick Hodgin and Matt Horton are the two guys that still hold the grail. Dick's got that big console and choice gear. And if you guys don't know about Matt Horton, look up Post Pro. He has a Neve Genesis. It's a modern Neve. And
wow.
I produced a couple songs over there in 2018. Great studio. Really. That's his place and Dick's place. And of course, Ian at Manifold, I've never been there. And Kudzu Ranch, which I've worked out of a few times with the,
What's the one over in Chapel Hill now? The Bunker? Or
I haven't been there. I don't know a lot about that place. Just the places that I know. I'm just saying, studios are having a hard time making a living.
Yeah.
And if you want to have a true, full-on pro recording experiences, those are some places you should call.
Yep.
But I had a place out in Rollsville, and I was trying to make a go of it, and I closed it because I realized, I'm teaching. That's a second shift job. It's not 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. It's 2 p.m. to 8 at night. I'm playing every weekend, traveling all the time, and a recording studio. And, there was a time when you could tell a band $600 for an 8-hour day. Nobody batted an eye.
Right.
And that's reasonable, And then it was, they want you to do $200 a day and work 14 hours. And I just realized, if I keep this studio open, I'll never see my child. He'll never see me. So I closed the studio. I gave up a couple career paths. Steve Johnson had asked me to direct a children's music program. Teenage bands at 2112 was a big growth thing we were doing, and I was supposed to do it. And I said, man, I can't do it. Because I watched my father do a youth symphony my entire life. I know what I would have done with it, and it wouldn't have been halfway. And not that the guy who's doing it did it halfway. He's fantastic. But I'm just saying, if I had done that, the amount of time it would have absorbed out of my life would have been unacceptable to try and be a father.
I've got to interject here because I forgot about the heart attack.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a whole other...
Yeah.
Like, I was in New York, doing my thing, and I talked with somebody about, not to interrupt you, but I was like, I can't believe we didn't even talk about this yet, but we're kind of getting up to that point in your timeline where somebody told me, like, or maybe it was you, like, I called you, and was like, oh yeah, I had a heart attack 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, what?
Yeah.
So, not to interrupt, but I'm sure there's a way you can weave that in.
Yeah. Well,
obviously.
You're not interrupting at all, man. Just, I end up, I'll carry the conversation as long as you want, but from our off-camera talks, I like talking back and forth too. So,
yeah.
Although I've been capitalizing all the time.
This is not a problem. This is why you're here.
So that continuum leads to a heart attack. It basically, like trying to decide, like, okay, I'll just be blunt, right? And maybe there's some musicians who won't like this, but this is my truth, right? So there comes a point, right, with marriage, children, and a career in music where you have to make up your mind, like which one is the dominant force. Now, I can give examples of musicians who I deeply admire that took that completely the other direction and just got out of music altogether. And in my opinion, that's the more important choice, And to be honest, I have considered that, and I have tried it several times. I've tried to just get out, just be done, be done. And it's something my wife and I have talked about over the years quite a bit. And here's what it comes down to. If I actually sit down, not like if we build it, they will come, but actually sit down and write down like pros and cons and what this will cost. Like, I didn't go to college, and I'm not saying that as a victim. That was a choice. I came out of high school and was like, man, I'm going to work at the car wash and play in this band. And then I'm going to quit the car wash when my band gets famous. Well, it didn't work out. I'm going to play these cover band. I'll work at this. I'll teach.
Right.
That's my path, right? So you mentioned that you got a business degree, right? And I have another student, Ben Marshall, your age or a little older, great drummer, and he ended up getting the degree and doing something outside of music. But my point is that if I could advise my past self, right, the number one thing would be like, dude, just go to college, like right out of high school, and get a degree in some type of business management. Like, just still play music, but understand how business works, and at least be able to, like, fold that over into some kind of a job to relieve yourself from doing music stuff you might not want to do to earn money, right? So none of that's in my past, right? And then you get to building up this full head of steam. I got $75,000 in the hole. I'm married. My wife's an artist, right? She's a painter and she makes beautiful jewelry. She's a photographer. She teaches art. She teaches English. And so she's got, student loan debt and, okay, there's a baby coming, And so it's like turning the Titanic, man.
Damn.
In terms of like, okay, well, what do we need to do? Well, we need to do this and this and this. We got to get our house ready and we got to do this. Okay, so let's get ready. And so the next few years are like this, me trying to figure out like I remember bringing all my studio gear home, and we live in a pretty moderate house, 1,500 square feet. I remember bringing all my studio gear home, all the racks of stuff and keyboards and 12 drum sets and Marshall stack and a basement and all the bandmaster, Hammond organ.
Oh, man.
Brought all my stuff home and put it in the living room and put it in what would be my son's room. It was like, all this stuff, like, how the hell do I, So I started, man, making deals, calling up people and companies and a Vintage King, and had original Blue Stripe 1176.
Oh,
yeah, called up Vintage King. Hey guys, and then I want to keep recording. And so anyway, I could talk about that for days, but the point really, the overarching point is that that's me trying to figure out like how to prioritize, and no negative.
It just is. It is what it is.
And no negative statement is meant by what I'm going to say next. But like, my parents' marriage exploded like a hand grenade, when I was about 13 and then again when I was about 17. And so for me, I kind of saw it as like, my goal was to have a gold record or platinum record or this or that, or to write this song or to do this or to do that or be in this famous band. And then it became, I'm with somebody I love, fortunate, and now I have this child. And you know what, man? The greatest goal I could possibly try to meet is to stay married, and that's not easy, no. It's not easy, right?
No.
It's not
especially
actually
in this day and age. It's just
and to raise my kid and to give him a more stable platform to launch from, so there's a whole series of things that goes with that. We decided to homeschool, and my wife initially didn't want to do that. It's the thing you got to work through, and we worked through it. And when she saw why that would be advantageous and she agreed with it of her own accord, man, she became the ultimate, homeschool mom. I mean, I remember working with you as a young person, and you were homeschooled at that time,
Yeah.
And I'm going to say this because this is part of my story. I saw in you, and for the people watching, I'm not saying one thing is better than another. Like, please don't, if there's comments on this, don't annihilate me. But this is what I observed, right? This is what I observed. I observed that kids that were homeschooled had a different level of access to self-actualization and creative processes than kids who are not. That's what I observed over and over and over again. That's what I observed, right? So that, plus we didn't have enough money to send my kid to private school, plus the things that I think are not going so well with our public school system, that we can have we do a politics and sociopolitics another day and get Joe Rogan and Ben Shapiro to come on with us or something, right? But that's a whole nother topic. But that's, I observed that. And I said, well, I think this would be the best thing. And if I'm going to make it my goal to dig to the roots of this, like I dig to the roots of everything else. And, again, once my wife got where she, she's amazing. I mean, people say that in interviews. Yeah, my wife's amazing. No, she's amazing.
Yeah.
And maybe that sounds contrived because I'm supposed to say it, but that's my heart.
That's
She's
true.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So that became the focus. Now the heart attack, long and short, man, that's a result of, well, let me put it this way to keep it short. I woke up in a hospital bed in February of 2015. It's another one of those, like, you'll never forget it. I would just crack this eye and I saw a ceiling, and I was like, I don't know where I am. And this voice said, well, hi, honey.
Welcome back.
We've been real worried about you. You've had a heart attack. You need to just lay still, And I, what? And I fell back asleep. And over the coming days, I saw my son again, and he was a little guy, and my wife, and I was told that I had had a heart attack and died. And my wife was there and managed to apply CPR and keep oxygen moving until the paramedics got there and determined that I was dead, and kicked her out of the room, and I guess did the paddles and the thing, and came out and told her, I don't remember any of this, by the way, right? Told her, we have a pulse, we're going to stabilize him, we're going to transport him, okay? So from what I understand, I was on a table at Wake Med within, half an hour. And if y'all don't know what it is, you can look it up on the internet, but they insert a catheter tube in one of your arteries in your leg, and they run it into your heart, and they find where your heart's blocked, and they open it up. So they did that. And now just to people understand, like, because I'm going to backtrack the story in a second, man, I weigh about 220 right now. I weighed 185. I worked out all the time, bench press my own body weight, squat way more than that, aerobic exercise all the time. But the thing is, man, is that, that didn't actually help my health. I was a vegetarian for almost 20 years. I'm not trying to say like, ooh, look, I was so good. What I'm trying to articulate is that when you go to cardiac rehab, when you learn to, I didn't have to learn to walk again like a person who broke his spine, but when you've been in a coma for 6 days, you do have to work on walking. So
wow.
When you go into cardiac rehab after you're up and about, they give you these tests. You fill out these tests for like what you eat and various things. I scored highest score you can possibly score on my diet. Right, I was an avid gym rat. If we rewind the tape, right, what I'm trying to articulate, I'm trying to not take up a lot of time with this, but the point being is that if you analyze what are your risk factors, right, diet, exercise, smoking, right, typical, right, you got a bad diet.
Drinking.
Well, maybe not for your heart, for a heart attack, I guess drinking, but I didn't drink,
Right.
None of the normal factors were there, So I'm trying to figure out, why did this happen? Why did this happen to me? And I should be clear. Sorry. The reason they put me in a coma is that once they had my heart opened up, I had two arteries that were blocked with a clot. It wasn't a blocked artery like a huge plaque blockage. It's actually a plaque, tiny bit of plaque that bursts and it creates a clot, right? Stop my heart. So once they had me stabilized, I was not conscious. I'd been on a vent tube, right? Well, they told my wife, they said, his heart is actually perfectly healthy, but he's not had an adequate oxygen supply, for 45 minutes. So we're really concerned that if we wake him up, he's not going to be in there. Right. So what they did, and I'm going to cry.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm going to cry is I want to say, since you asked me to do a little bit of documentation of my life, the people at Wake Med, EMS people, the fire people, thank you. Right.
Yeah.
Anytime you hear an ambulance go by, you should, be grateful. They saved my life. My wife saved my life. If she hadn't been home, if she hadn't applied CPR when she did, I wouldn't be here. So what they do is they pack you in ice. It's called therapeutic hypothermia. So it lowers your body temperature. You're hypothermic. In order to do this safely, they have to draw a lot of blood, check enzyme levels, nutrients, and they keep you like that. And it's apparently some type of super healing. So that's what they did. Pack you in ice, and then they eventually raise your body temperature.
Right.
So 6 days later, they wake me up. And I spend the next 6 days, having people help me walk around and getting my legs back under me and eating again. And can I write? Is my faculty's gone?
Yeah.
I told the doctor, well, tell my family to get a practice pad and some sticks. I mean, it was almost the first day.
Right.
I'll tell you if I still got my faculties.
Right.
Let me see if I can play.
Right.
And I didn't practice at all in the hospital, but they brought me my pad and I went, okay,
It's there.
We're good.
Wow.
And after 6 days, man, I was ready to go home. And, they didn't really want me to go home. But I was like, this is killing me to be in here, And I'll give credit where credit's due. And you probably know this guy, and this is such a great story. I'll tell it. I have a friend named Cameron Brown, and you guys look him up online, drumsculptor.com. He's a brilliant, if you need your bearing edges done or your refinishing work or anything. He actually, Danny Carey and Tool is actually using one of his snare drums on tour, right?
Wow.
Well, right, was before COVID.
Right.
Well, he works at a hospital. And I called him up. And I said, man, what do I got to do to get out of here? And he was like, the doctor comes in, the first thing, cardiologist? It's like, yeah. He's like, well, when he comes in, have your shoes on, have your clothes on. Don't be in your gown. When he comes in, stand up. If you can stand, don't do it if you can't do it.
Right.
And he's like, stand up, shake his hand, tell him you're ready to go home. And I did, and
wow.
And he, you can't do that. And I said, well, okay, tell me what do I got to do? And he said, well, if all the specialists and therapists, you ask them throughout the day what you have to do. If you can achieve those tasks, you can go home. And so, I wasn't trying to be uncautious,
right.
So everybody that came in that day to work with me, I just was like, hey, look, I don't want to go home too early, but I want to go home. I think I'm ready. I don't want to recover here. I want to recover at home. So what do I got to do? And, they'd say, well, you have to be able to walk this far or do this or do that. And I go, okay, well, let's try it. And they go, okay. And I did. And so I went home. Now, that said, for those of y'all watching, I probably should have stayed in there a little longer. I mean, my chest, my ribs hurt for a year and a half, like CPR, like when you got firemen and EMS people pounding you to try and keep you alive. So every day was like, just, man. I mean, my heart didn't hurt. It's my actual cartilage.
Wow.
In my chest. So, okay, so there's the heart attack, and I spent the next 3 months recovering at home, going to cardiac rehab. Again, this is just all, the tears will start. Again, thank you, everybody in the Raleigh community that sent money to my family, that came to the benefit and played. The Rock School, Tim Pemberton donated money, Steve Johnson, rest in peace, all the guys at 2112.
Yep.
Mike Pitts, Rob Bilodeau, he organized that benefit show. All these people, right? Because that got us through. And then the long list of people that donated on the internet, the GoFundMe.
Yeah.
But why? So why did that happen? Okay, so we go back to 2007. We have a child, and this is my analysis, and this is how I'm living my life now, right? It's based on this. So we go back to 2007, and I'm a father. I'm playing in this band, and I still have all these hopes and dreams, and I'm figuring out what to get rid of that doesn't fit into my life anymore. And I'm married, and I'm trying to work on my marriage, and my wife, the reason we're still married is that we're if there's always going to be problems, but if you're willing to come back and sit down at the table and talk again every single time, even when there's a hand grenade that goes off and people got to distance themselves for, somebody's got to go for a drive. Yeah. If you're willing to come back and sit and talk about it, maybe that means you read some books. Maybe that means you get some therapy. Maybe that means you pray. Whatever that means, you come back to that table and you talk about it and you grow, right? So we're still married and they're working on all these things. And at this time, there's a whole bunch of the story that belongs off camera, but just suffice it to say that the history of, my parents divorcing and all kinds of different family entanglements and people having different opinions caused a lot of fracturing, right? And so when you're sober, and I'm not saying that people who are not sober don't feel this too, but I'm just saying when you're sober, you're not taking the edge off, with a glass of whiskey or whatever. This shit weighs on your heart, And so having a child born, any weak point in family structures, and I'm talking about extended family, parents, brothers, cousins, right? Any weak point in family structure, in my experience, please, this is just me talking. I am not saying that this is everybody. Any weak point in family structures and interactions is stressed to the point that if it's going to break, it's going to break.
It's going to break.
And some of that shit broke. And some of it had been broken for years.
Yeah.
I'm trying to process all that. And I'm talking to people in my 12-step community. I'm talking to a therapist. All at the same time, my dad's aging. He needs a little bit of help around his yard. I'm driving over there. I'm trying to help him fix this fence or do this. So basically, man, I'm getting up early in the morning, doing physical labor, coming home, being a dad, going to work, teaching. And then I'm staying at my teaching studio till 2 or 3 in the morning to practice and to write songs and to try and keep all that stuff lubricated.
Still moving. Yeah.
Then I'm getting off there and I'm going to the gym and I'm working out like I'm 22, and I'm doing this over and over. And I'm smoking cigarettes, right? That was my I had never been able to quit smoking cigarettes. And I'm fueling all this with coffee, right? Which is the musician's drug of choice, right? So I'm an avid coffee drinker. Everyone knows that. I now drink 1 cup of coffee a day. And so all of that leads to hypertension and stress. And, again, people can disagree with me. It's fine. My experience is that heart disease is not just about eating and smoking. It's about the grievances, the resentments, and the betrayals and the pains that weigh on your heart.
It's almost psychological.
Yeah, psychosomatic, right?
Yeah, psychosomatic.
So all that leads up to my heart fails.
Wow.
Right? And I'm traveling every weekend, with rubber band.
Yeah.
I'm driving to Charleston. I'm playing a show. I'm packing up. I'm driving home. I'm getting in my car. The next morning at 9:00, I'm driving to Richmond. I'm packing up and driving home. I'm driving the next day and I'm doing an afternoon show. I'm doing all this stuff. So the heart attack, man, again, a lot of this stuff belongs off camera, so I won't be very specific. But obviously, if you're listening to this and you're hearing what I'm saying, there's a lot of subtext that I'm presenting, which is that I am always trying to look at the deeper motivations or reasons behind why things may manifest in my life. So this means that there are subtexts in my spirit, in the hearts of men, in my heart, that need to change, that are not, not necessarily the greatest thing. I mean, we talked about this on the phone about, you see other people successful in their career. I'll admit it. I hope y'all can admit it. Sometimes we resent it deep down. I mean, we'll say, "Oh, bro, that was so cool,"
Yep.
but deep down we're like, "How come that didn't get
why? Yeah.
So here's the bottom line: because I have a perspective, a filter set, and this is again just for me, right? My filter set is very much based on spiritual outlook of recovery mindset and having a functional life, which basically means that there's always going to be some deeper layer of myself I can improve. I'm just going to say it so no matter how badass I think I am, there are things inside of me that I can't change. Right. And so that comes down to God. Right. And so, as I alluded to earlier, early on in recovery, for those of you that don't know, if you try to get sober, you go into a recovery program, you need to find some form of higher power. So as I alluded to earlier, I meditated with Buddhists and Swamis and all these various things. So over the course of my son being born and him being homeschooled, a lot of homeschool communities are Christian, and I don't and didn't identify as a particular religious form. But as the years have gone by, I thought, man, I really had to read this Bible more. And what I found is that everything that I know about the human condition, like the things that man suffers from and that I suffer from, is explained in the Gospels in a way that nothing else quite explains it. Like there's a thing. My son went to a summer camp, and the counselors gave out these little cards, and it had their favorite Bible quote. And I'm thinking, that's kind of silly, but okay. Well, tell me about who my son's spending time with. So I go home and I look it up. And man, some of that stuff was really profound, And so one of the things I came across during that time period was this, and I don't know where it is. I'm not good at quoting it, but I think it's in Romans. It says, the law only reveals the extent of people's enslavement to the power of sin.
Yeah, Paul, yeah.
And I thought, man, is that not exactly the damn truth? Like, we wouldn't even need a law if people didn't murder. So the extent of people's enslavement to the power of sin or crime or evil or whatever you call it. So what I'm saying is that these things don't happen overnight. These are growth cycles, right? And so through my spiritual growth, I eventually came to the conclusion that what Jesus Christ had to say is the most definitive explanation of the hearts of men. And, I know that can make a comment section go crazy, but look, here's the thing. And I'll just argue it this way. You can look at, did the guy live? Did he not? Is there evidence for this? Is it an imaginary friend in the sky? Fine,
right.
whatever.
Right.
Go for it. But here's the thing that I've come to. Let's just say that these figures in the Bible, Paul, Peter, just start naming them all. I can't name them all. Let's just say they're imaginary. It never happened. It's a completely fictitious story, right? Man, people, and I've did this. You watch Star Wars, and you're like, the good side of the Force and the bad side of the Force. Oh, right, and the mitochondria, and and this and that and the other. People live their spiritual lives based on these theoretical examples, which are obviously based on spiritual subtext from different religions, right? Great. So let's just say the Bible is a George Lucas film, right? Just that's all it is. It's still the most definitive statement on the state of mankind, right? And to say that it's outdated is crazy. I mean, if he says this is the most, what does he say, Jason? The most wicked generation, like it's still applicable, right?
Yeah.
So my point is, right, is I'm just trying to state the truth plainly that heart attack, waking up in that hospital bed, recovering, looking at the influences, the choices I made, the Superman that I thought I was, that I could still do all this stuff and be a good father and do this and be Merritt Partridge and do this and do this. That's my ego, and that's not real. A man can only do what a man can do. And here's the point. This is the take home, right? Is that the heart attack changed things in me like that I could not change inside my own mind, my own heart, the way I viewed the world through years of trying. And I'm an avid, I've read so many transactional analysis and Eric Berne and Martin Groter. Mm-hmm. There's a ton of things I can quote. They're great. You should read them all. And I'm glad I read them. But that heart attack was an opportunity. Okay, well, sorry, this is my truth. I experienced a resurrection. Literally, yeah. So I can't possibly ignore all that.
Right.
The implication of all that. And so I'm not saying that I woke up from a heart attack and became a Christian. I'm not even saying that. And I don't even claim that now, right? Because I don't like to attach myself to what that has come to mean.
The connotations with it.
What I will say is that the story of Jesus Christ, the gospel, is the most important thing to my heart at this point in my life, right? And that I have tried to follow spiritual paths for years, and now I have a much clearer picture of what that's supposed to look like.
Right.
And that I'm doing my best to improve myself a little bit every day, right? In that, I don't like any of the conventional ways to say it, but I suppose the conventional way is the body of Christ. Right. Right. I suppose that's really what it is. So that's the heart attack, is it leads me to that. And then there's a bunch of nuts and bolts that come with and so again, sorry if I'm freaking anybody out, or you don't, this is why I'm not on the internet. I don't want to, I can't go on Facebook. For those of you that wonder, right? I can't go on Facebook and Twitter and all these social media. And I'm sorry, I know some of y'all love it, but I can't sit on there and bicker and politics and this and that and the other. I need to be me, and that's it. And I wouldn't do this interview if I didn't know you so deeply for so many years, because I don't trust people with the core of what I am, because people are vicious when you just simply have a spiritual perspective that fulfills your heart. That for some reason they don't like, whether it points out things about them they dislike, or whether they're in the camp that they're atheists, or they, whatever the case may be. There's a bunch of reasons, right? Well, I don't really care. I just don't care, right? So the heart attack was an opportunity. It was a wake-up call. As you can see, I weigh about 220 now. I found out that, exercising at that pace, trying to maintain my weight at 35 or 28, man, it was a waste of time, really. It was not at that age, is what I'm saying. At that age, with the other stressors that I had.
Right.
I'm not saying that's a waste of time. If you have the time and you have the means and that's your career, then by all means, go for the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
But so now my diet is based on all of the things that are good for my heart. And I do exercise. I don't smoke cigarettes. I do use nicotine supplements occasionally. I still have, still struggle with that. But I have not smoked a cigarette since February of 2015. So that's the heart attack, right?
Yeah.
And that's it in a nutshell. Now, the rest of what I'm encapsulating, it's been 5 years. So what I'm saying and what I want to make clear is that it took me 5 years from that heart attack to now to come to what I am saying to you today, right? It's not like I woke up and everything was different, and that's the number one thing I dislike about the way social media presents things is that, we just do this and I'm supposed to, Twitter, I'm supposed to express myself in 140 characters or whatever the limit is. Come on, man. Like, so we've spent how many centuries, right, evolving, right, and coming to a next conclusion or the next layer of acceptance of people or the next level of trying to love your neighbor as you love yourself or in some form of the golden rule or whatever. And then I'm supposed to tweet about something. That's really the best we can do. And some people may find this highly offensive, but that's what I think, and then, it's the classic that what falls in that category is like, your buddy's like, hey man, listen to my new song. And I think, so you got how many thousands of dollars in mic pre's in there, and you got how many decades of work? I'm not saying you personally, but like, and you want me to hear like your inspiration, your heart, what God gave you to express, or if you're an atheist, what came from the universe or whatever. I respect all that. That's, I'm saying this is for me, You want me to hear that on that? Like that's the highest representation of that like that's how I want to hear it. And it's an MP3. So if y'all don't know the technology, go look it up. It's like there's a whole bunch of information missing from that file, So to me, it's like, man, at least come over to my house and bring me a CD and let's listen to it on a stereo. Right? Let me actually receive it with all the glory, right? that was meant when that came from your heart and you expressed it. So that's, so the internet thing, it's a valuable tool. I do use it. I got email, blah, 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 blah. This will be on the internet. I like YouTube, even though they make their money on the backs of, piracy, which is, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go research it. It's really easy to find. So the heart attack, that pushes us into Merritt 2.0.
Yeah. Well, I don't even think I asked a question, and we covered it all.
What else you want to know? I
you
guess
you hit everything.
I guess the only other thing that should be said is there should be I just should because my son will watch this. That's what I'm doing musically, right? That's my life at this moment. Is we have a band. My wife plays, and at some point maybe we'll do some shows. That all was born out of his journey. Well, what musical instrument do you want to play? Well, I want to play this. He arrives at guitar. Well, we homeschool, and that's a beautiful thing, and I love our homeschool community. But there's no music program, So I said, man, if I could put together something that's easy to carry, lightweight. Oh, okay. We'll do traditional tunes, bluegrass tunes, country tunes, because I can play an acoustic guitar. My son can play the melodies, read the sheet music, and my wife was gracious enough to learn to play the bass well enough to boom, boom, boom. So we rehearse and we play tunes and sing. And he recently sang on his first song that I recorded. So that's my big focus musically now is writing songs And I hate, I'm gonna sound like such a hypocrite, but like now I have some songs that I'm like, man, I kind of like to share these with people, and I suppose I'm gonna have to confront.
Are you saying that this is the first step?
I'm gonna have to confront that there's gonna probably have to be a digital way to share it. Like, because you and I have discussed this. What I would like to do is press it on vinyl and give it to people.
Disclaimer.
Yeah, if you transfer this to digital in any form, you'll be cursed to the millionth generation. But I'd like to press it on vinyl and maybe even give it to people, right?
Yeah.
And but so yeah, I don't know what the future will hold. But my son's name is Jackson. My wife is Jennifer, and that's what we're doing at the moment. The band has no name, and we've done a couple little. The idea is more to go play like a living room party. And sing and get people singing. No microphones, So we'll see where that leads. And that, of course, means that I'm not drumming in any band at the moment. I'm just practicing and recording.
Right.
Which is kind of nice because I just kind of sit and keep everything lubricated,
Yeah. So,
yeah, man. Did we cover, like, what you had hoped to?
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything that... I mean, there's... If I sat here for a minute and I thought about it, there's probably all kinds of people that I'm leaving out that deserve, just not deserve like because I'm on a show, but in my heart that deserve a mention. And I'll say that it took me, Jason graciously, said, "Hey, you got to come on my show." And I said, I'm going to do it, man. On the internet thing, And we had a conversation, and he made some points that I thought were valid, and very valid. And I said, okay, yeah, I'll do it. That's cool. I want to do it. And so I kind of walked into this. I have spilled a lot of beans. Don't judge me too harshly, right? I kind of came into this not intending to say as much as I have said, but the spirit of it is such that I'm just going with it. So if this is a thing and you're watching it and you go, hey, wait a minute, he did this thing with me and I did that. I'm sorry. Like I'm trying to catalog.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. It's so much.
Oh, Guru Guitars. That would be the person. That's who I'm forgetting.
That's I have it written right here, and I have it written towards the end because it's current.
Gene and Howard and Zach, and again, just the encapsulated. Those guys, you need your guitar worked on. They're brilliant. I had my guitars worked on there. They knew that I, wrote and produced and taught, and they offered me a teaching job, teaching music on guitar, and I took it because they're fantastic shop, and I've been at 2112 for, I don't know, whatever it is now, a couple decades, and I thought, man, it'd be cool to have something to do one day a week that's different, and it's really enabled me to take my guitar game up to the next level, and that then means that I shouldn't forget, Scott Sawyer, I studied with him a little bit, and Scott, I know I haven't called you, man, but I'm still working on the last thing. Really, seriously, changed everything. And Gene Reinert, brilliant player and great teacher, and of course, you can come study with me.
Yeah.
So those guys are great, and I've been there for a couple.
2016, I think it said in your bio.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's groovy, and I like, and I'll be there, hopefully for another 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, and all the local shops, support your local shops.
Mm-hmm.
Like, go to Harry's first, go to Guru first, go to 2112 first. I don't know who else I'm forgetting, but even like where'd all the cats end up from Indoor Storm? Pure Sound, that's local, right? Go to your local stores first,
or Southeast Camera, for video and all that.
Yeah, absolutely, Southeast Camera. Yeah, definitely.
A lot of good stuff there. Yeah, so we do this thing at the end called the shootout section, which is I say a word that's industry related to the guest.
Okay.
And you say the first word, first phrase that comes to mind.
Okay.
Guitar.
Awesome.
Bass.
Low.
Kick.
Drum.
Snare.
Drum.
Vocal.
Mic.
Toms.
Fill.
Overheads.
Mic.
If you want to get specific on some of those, you can.
Well, I think I'm trying to go. I know I'm boring, but,
All right,
but
no.
you know what that's coming from is labeling a console or
Right.
Overhead mic. I mean, that's the way.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Because we didn't really talk much about gear and all that, but we can get into a little bit here.
Well,
at
yeah,
the
I
end.
mean, I can tell you my favorite of whatever, or if that's what you're interested in.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So
let's start. I mean, we don't have to go all the way back.
Sure,
but,
sure.
So vocal mic. I mean, which is a whole can of worms.
my favorite thing, and this is something I experienced only at one studio, the way I actually wanted to do it, which was at Kudzu Ranch, was to line up, a dozen. Like we had a U67 and a C12, and he had these Microtech Gefell. Oh. And that's not a statement against any other studio I've worked at. The reason I could do it is the artist was willing to take the time.
Right.
He was willing to take the time to plug in 6 brilliant mics and try API and a Neve and what else does he have out? He's got API, Neve. He's got UA to try 3 or 4 different pre's, find the right thing, and then try LA2A, 1176,
Right.
Blue Stripe, Blackface, Distressor, and then some oddball thing until we found the perfect thing, right? My favorite thing, if you were just going to give me one, is the M149, the Neumann M149.
I think that's Dick's too.
Yeah, and that's because when we did Big Pun, that was the mic he wanted, and I heard it, and I was like, oh my God.
It's very clean,
well,
right, from what I know.
And I would say a U47, but only if we could take a time machine and go back to 1958 and bring one back exactly with the VF14 tube in good shape and all the... Because Mark had 2 of them at Sonic Wave, and he had an original that he never had worked on, and it constantly... I mean, you would only get it out when you just were like,
please.
This singer is like amazing, and this mic has to work. And then he had one that had been rebuilt by Tracy Corby, which sounded fantastic. He's a great... Tracy Corby's great, but
the mojo of
just
the original
wasn't quite the same.
Yeah.
So the 149, from my understanding, is Neumann saying at some point, and I think this is at least 15 years ago, hey, yeah, we're never going to make another U47, but if we did, it would be this M149. And so we had a pair of those at Sonic Wave, so I used them a lot. But myself, I sound good singing into a 414 TL2, the model before it had a light on it.
Right.
Right?
The older ones.
A Neve Pre, a 8108 specifically, and a Blue Stripe 1176. And that was when I had all the gear I wanted. Like, hey, that makes me sound the way I think I should sound. Now, because the priority is, child rearing and marriage and making money without doing a bunch of crazy music stuff I don't really want to do. I'm actually using a Mojave Audio 201 FET at home, and that's a TJ Beachel recommendation. He's a really smart guy.
Yep.
And I'm plugging that, ironically enough, I'm plugging that straight into a Digi 001. And if you guys want a little trick that you don't know about, if you don't have an outboard compressor, you route your your mic pre input to a aux input, and you put a compressor on there, right? And then you bus that to your record track.
That's it.
So you can get a compressor on the front end of your vocal track
if you want. Yeah,
print it. Well, yeah, and I do. I print it with the compression. So that's what I'm using at home right now. Is it as awesome? No, not even close. I just tracked a song and been listening to it, and I'm like, the high end's a little. It's just and I can hear there's little stuff coming through, but that's a great mic. It's highly recommended. So yeah, in the laundry list, like I like the M149 at Matt Horton's place, just because we knew it was gonna be instantly cool. We used a U87. I like that a lot. That's a you almost can't go wrong with the U87. But then, you know, there's a plethora of things I'm unaware of. I'm sure that if you had a comment section and we were doing a video just on mics, there'd be a whole slew of opinions that,
Right.
oh, well, this and that and the other. And it's like, okay, but at the end of the day, if it works for you, sounds good, you're happy with it, then that's the right thing. Like how I arrived at the 201 FET is I ordered a Neumann TLM 103 from TJ. This is years ago. And I got it and I used it and I thought, man, that does not sound like a Neumann. Like that is just not, because I was thinking M149. And so TJ, being Mr. Awesome, he calls me up, how you liking that mic? And I'm like, actually, I don't like it at all. Really? Well, okay, blah, 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 blah. Why not? And I'm like, well, because I'm a gear snob and I want it to sound like this. And he was like, okay, send it back. I'm going to send you this instead and try it. And I did, and it was great.
Wow.
So that's that. And then like drum mics, man, that's such a mixed bag.
Oh, so mixed.
My main thing is if people ask, right? And this is very opinionated, so just discount it if you don't like it. Just completely ignore it. Don't buy the pre-pack of the cheap drum mics. Just don't. Just don't do it. You'd be better off to get a pair or a single, just nice overhead mic and a decent kick mic, like a D6 and a 414, and just start there. The best recording advice for drums I ever got in my entire life, I will say this, when I was first recording, Kenny Soul said, take a SM57, put it right here, and play drums, and see if you can get a drum track that is what you think it should sound like by playing the volumes you want, by tuning the drums different, and so on and so on and so on. Now, I know extreme metal guys, you got to have the triggered kick and all that. And I get it. What I'm talking about is if you're into like recording and you want to do it for yourself and you want to really start from the ground up and build your muscles properly, your recording chops, do that. Just do it for a month before you buy anything else. I did it, man, and I would stick that mic there and I would tune the bass drum different, change from a felt beater to a wood beater, tune the snare. I'll have to play the cymbal quiet. Imagine that, you know? So then when you get a nice kick mic or a nice overhead, and I'm a huge fan of the last thing I produced at Matt Horton's place. I mean, I think it had to have been $50,000 worth of mics on the drums.
Right.
I mean, 3 kick mics and all, you know, craziness.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of that. I love it.
The Bob Rock method.
I love it. But the bottom line is if you can do this, right here,
and get your balance,
that's a really good place to start. And if you've never tried it, then deconstruct your setup down to there, you know. So anyway,
that's cool.
What's the rest of the shootout?
Room.
Mike.
Piano.
Wish I had one.
Organ.
Hammond.
Yeah, of course. So now we're going to get into the part where, again, if you want to elaborate a little bit more, you can.
Okay.
Distortion.
Super lead.
Yeah. Amp, which
Super
probably
lead.
Probably the same. Yeah.
1973.
It was funny because when I hung out with Ryan Massacre.
Oh, yeah.
And when we jammed, it was before all this craziness. It was like back in December. I think your Plexi was hanging out or something.
Yeah. It's actually just after the Plexi, but it's the same circuit. It's a 73 JMP Super Lead. And it actually, for people that are interested in this, it belonged to Tommy Red. It's the amp that he recorded Heartbreaker on. It's the amp that he toured, opening for Kiss, Blue Oyster Cult, everything they ever did.
Wow.
That's the amp, the head, the amp, and I own the Les Paul that goes with it, which he gave to me a number of years ago. And I use it. It's actually become the only guitar that I play. Wow. I don't play any other guitar other than an acoustic my father-in-law gave me. And then the Marshall, I use it every day, but what I do is I use a Palmer analog speaker simulator, and a load box. So your Marshall is plugged into your speaker simulator. And the Palmer, for people who don't know, is a series of filters that electronically, not digitally, recreates the filter curve that your speaker gives you. So it has a setting that's kind of like a greenback and a setting that's kind of like a modern or a Jensen and kind of like a mid 80s Celestion. And so the way I found out about it was watching rig rundowns on. Shout out to Premier Guitar. Like,
hell yeah.
I didn't know when you go see all these famous bands, these huge like Rush. You're not hearing any mic cabinets. You're hearing amps, real tube amps into Palmer speaker simulators.
And that's it.
Well, of course,
this is all in-ears now anyway. What the hell's the difference? Yeah.
And of course, you have to have a load on the amp. So I actually use a THD hot plate for the load. So you come out of the amp, you go into the speaker simulator, you come out of the speaker simulator, you go into the hot plate set on load.
Right.
And so I have the super lead, and what I did is I bought if anybody cares about this kind of thing, I bought a Marshall 2061X, which is the 20 watt super lead, and it's the hand wired, made in England. It's a recreation of a 20 watt super lead from the same era as the real one I have, maybe a few years before.
Right.
So yeah, the super lead for me, and no, it doesn't do sparkly, spanky clean the same way a Fender does, but that's what I like.
Right.
And I've owned vintage Fenders and Mesa Boogies and Dr. Z's and vintage Gibson amps, and they're all fantastic. And for the record, if I could still have them all, I would. When I had a studio, there was a rack, and it had all those amps on the rack, and all those amps had a speaker cable that ran out of them into another room. And so you could
just patch it in.
And all those speaker cabinets had mics on them. And so you could sit in the control room and try the Fender and try the Marshall. And, So partially because he gave me an amp that has a lot of history and a lot of vibe, I'll never sell it. And partially, because that's actually the sound I really like, is the pre-JCM 800. Even though the JCM 800 is, I would own that too. That's a great amp. I think you have one of those. Yeah,
it was one of the last ones before they changed things.
Yeah.
In the mid '90s.
So for the shootout, super lead.
Yeah. Saturation. And again, this is getting more into like recording world, but...
Oh, saturation. That would be like, I just see in my head a tape VU meter.
That's exactly what Dick said
tapping on
last week.
turning red.
That's it. Yep. Delay.
Eventide.
Yeah. I think Dick said that too. What? Man. God. EQ.
Neve.
Yeah. You and I both. Man,
Or API, but I should clarify that. Let me clarify that. Obviously, everyone's favorite Holy Grail is a 10 series, 1073 and so on. My first interaction with a Neve was the 8108, which is the console that
Those are the newer ones, perhaps, right?
They are newer, but they're old. They're still vintage. It's the first console that Neve made after Rupert Neve left Neve.
Okay.
So it's I think the year, I actually do not know, but I think it's late 70s, early 80s. The console we had been used to do the pedigree was it came from so long ago. I think it was called Mad Dog Studios, California. I believe it did a Sheryl Crow record, Parliament Funkadelic, among many other things. It had not the traditional Neve EQ, like the big knobs. It had a much more surgical EQ. Mm-hmm. But the quality of what it did was as high as the other Neve EQs. And the two experiences I had in my life that are similar to this are, it turned on that EQ and started just, seeing what it would do. And I went, oh my God, is that what EQ does? Like, I'm supposed to be able to just sculpt the finest little, to me, it just blew my mind.
Wow.
I just thought, all these years I've been, seek and destroy, and that's what led me to like, oh man, okay, so if the song's in this key, and that's the fundamental, and then these are the harmonics, and that's that because the EQ was so powerful, right. So that experience, and then the first time I used a U47, just sticking it in front of a drum set and having the drummer play and just going, that's how you get that drum sound. Like that's it. You just stick it in front of the drummer and go. And of course, that's not always that simple, but it was in that case. So yeah, the EQ, Neve, and any Neve, but I'm a fan of all that stuff, man. But the interesting thing for people to ponder is a lot of that depends on if you're EQing post, like after you get in the box. Mm-hmm. I just had this experience which confirmed this theory for me, right? I'm recording a new song and I'm using a Soundcraft EPM, just basic $200 mixer from Sweetwater for the mic trees. I'm going straight into the analog inputs in Digi 001. It sounds fine. It's good quality. It sounds great. It's not phenomenal. But the real difference is that, man, I was using some plugins to EQ it, and I'm like, man, this EQ isn't doing anything. Like, I'm having to add, it's like when you record something with a high quality mic pre, everything else down the stream functions at a much more superior level. Right. Even compressors, everything, Yep. So Neve EQ, but that's most likely for me because that was that magic moment, was a Neve 8108 EQ, right? Was the magic. Of course, it's the same thing when I used a Pultec for the first time on a stereo bus, and I have to tell this story is that when Sonic Wave really upped their game and he bought a pair of Pultecs, they came from the studio where Rush had recorded a bunch of big hits, a bunch of songs. And so you have to know that Sonic Wave was in the same building as 2112 Percussion, right? And so every drummer that walked in there, you're like, this EQ? So think about it. The probability that low-end knob got turned on Neil Peart's kick drums is pretty high probability, right? Right. So you kind of had to go over and touch it. Yeah. It's a Blarney Stone. So EQ, Pultec, Neve, whatever, but for me, the 8108 was the. It's not that it's the best sounding. They all sound good at that. It's like Ferrari, Lamborghini,
it's
Corvette. They all sound great at that level, man. But for me, it was the 8108.
Yeah. Reverb.
Eventide. Lexicon, but I'm more of an Eventide guy.
Compression.
LA2A.
Same. Literally the same.
And it depends on what. You know what I mean? Like if you just say compression, that's what I see in my head.
But still, it's like...
But I like them all.
That island compressor. That's what I would take.
Like your setup is reflective of... I think if you're a vocalist, you should have an LA2A and 1176 because you need to hear the difference.
Right,
But
depends.
Then hearing the DBX stuff is great. One of my favorite compressors of all time was the Manley Very Mew.
Yeah.
And Rick Miller had a... I'm going to get this wrong. I think it was called a TGI Abbey Road. It was made by Chandler. And I think it's a replica of a Fairchild. Mm-hmm. So that's great too.
Yeah.
I mean, Distressor. I'm a huge Distressor fan.
It's funny because I went through the Distressor phase, but then it was like, whatever. But I've never owned a hardware Distressor. I used them in Manifold, but it was never,
There's a very particular way you can use like a parallel compression to get your snare to sound with a Distressor.
I've used it with...
that I've struggled to get without a Distressor.
Right.
There's a thing.
To me, I chalk it up to like a what's his name, Andrew Sheps type of when he was working with Metallica. That to me is like that Distressor. Yeah.
Yeah. But when you say compressor, the first thing that pops in my mind is the LA2A.
LA2A.
Yeah.
Yeah. North Carolina.
Home.
I think of Snoopy's Hot Dogs. I was like, man, I could go for that right now.
Home.
2112.
Home.
Yep. And pizza.
Jackson. That's Jackson's. Like, my son has 3 favorite foods. That would be Indian butter chicken, pizza and some form of Mediterranean. You know, he likes Mediterranean food.
Yeah.
So pizza, Jackson.
Well, you already kind of answered this earlier, but if you want to tag on an extra 30 or 60 seconds, if you could go back in time to your 15-year-old self, knowing what you know now, what would you tell him?
Man, I mean, the realist answer.
And we ask everybody this question. This
Sure.
is always the last question.
No, I get it. The realist answer is that I wouldn't change a thing because I wouldn't be who I am, and all the struggles and trials and tribulations and all the awesome shit that I was blessed with and the privileges I had with my parents in classical music. I wouldn't change a thing. And I think that's a valid answer. I think I was supposed to be molded into this guy with and I think that question is often asked in the context of what would you tell yourself to avoid, right? And that's a valid question, right? So the realist in me says, well, I am who I am. Now, if the thing is could I get through to that guy? Like that's also like I can't. That's a hard question to answer for me. Because you were 15, there were things I wanted to tell you about your career that I couldn't get through to you, right? And it's not that you made a bad choice that I thought you shouldn't have made, and that's just from not a parental view, but a teacher guy.
Right.
I'm watching this kid. He's got these opportunities. He's doing this shit. Pardon me. You can bleep that, right? It's blowing my mind. God, okay, it's not my business. You had to own it for yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And that's something I tell a lot of parents, and I have to follow the same rule. Your mom will watch this. I told your mom that. She will call me, why is he doing this? And I go, he's got to own it for himself. You got to let him figure it out. He has to own that choice and that direction that he's taking musically. You got to let him own it. So could I get through to that guy? Right. Okay. So if I could get through to him, I would say, man, this drug thing is a nowhere path, right? It's going to derail so many things that you can achieve in this life. And it did, I mean, you and I had this conversation. This is going to be a little longer than 60 seconds, but I think it bears saying is that you and I had this conversation privately that, I have people that I taught like you for a long time, or people that took for a year or two or a month or two, Mike McKee or different guys that, maybe I didn't work with them for years and years, but I've been in their sphere. Right. And you guys have achieved, amazing things, And so I've been asked by students, I've been asked this question, and I'm not saying this because I resent it. I'm saying, I'm going to say this because I've been asked this privately. So I'm going to answer it publicly. Right. How come you're not more well known? Why are you not, not that I think I'm great. That's not it. It's what people have asked me.
They've asked.
Like, how come you're not in this article or over here or doing this? Well, man, a lot of it is because I had to spend the majority of my formative years getting my head screwed on straight. And some of y'all were taking lessons from me while that was going on. If we rewind the clock all the way back, y'all were a part of me getting my head screwed on straight because I had something to show up for. I had something, that required me to be the best me that I could possibly be at that time every week. I might not have been the best me I could possibly be the rest of the time.
Right.
So if I could tell me at 15, it would be, man, don't hang out with those guys, right? And this drug thing is for nothing, man. But I also, if I could do that, I would have to give that guy. You can't just go back and, if I know who I was and what was going on in my life at that time and the influences that are around me and the people and relationships that were good and the ones that were disintegrating, you can't just tell a 15-year-old that and then expect him to react. You have to give him something to hang on to. Right. So part of the answer, honestly, would be I couldn't just tell him something. I would have to change his circumstances, right? And I'm not saying I had some horrific childhood like people. There's plenty of my friends that have had it far worse than me. But like when your family's disintegrating, and I'm not going to say this like to out somebody, but you people in your family maybe are suffering from I'll be vague, right? Maybe you have people who are suffering from mental illness, or maybe you have people that are also suffering from addiction and you're suffering from it too. Like there's a lot of different conflicting waveforms that are causing harmonies that are just not vibing, life-wise. So if I could help that 15-year-old me find a different circumstance, maybe give him some spiritual compass, spiritual compass, and some grounding and something to hang on to. And, the irony is that the drum set, that was something I could hang on to. But what direction that pushed me in terms of the life choices I made, I might have made good musical choices, but the life choices I was making that related to the instrument weren't necessarily the best, So what would I tell him? Well, man, and I'm not, and for the record, I'm not against drinking or people want to smoke weed or whatever. I personally don't do it. And I think that if you will find you're better off without it, right, in the end of the day. But there are plenty of people who do not have they got no problem with it. I'm not trying to judge that, right? But the point being is I think you're better off without it, and to be able to tell him, like, man, that's nowhere. And these people, right, you not that you should judge them, but that you got if that's what they're going to do, you need to let them go on their way and do that. Right. But to do that, you would have to give that 15-year-old a level of self-esteem and self-confidence. And
There's got to be something to fill the void.
Yeah, and that's this guy that's talking to you, from that kid is not possible. Right. That's the result of a lot of years of like, I don't want to live this way anymore. I got to find this. I got to find the next thing. I got to find the next thing. So don't do drugs, right? Don't do drugs and get your ass to church. But even though I'm not saying I don't know. Just spiritual direction is what I mean. I'm trying to be funny. There's a lot of seriousness going on.
No, man. I don't even know where we're at. We got a couple of minutes here, so I don't need to switch over with the cameras. Thanks so much. This was awesome. I mean, this is a milestone for me because, without you, I mean, we wouldn't be doing this.
Man, I don't even have words. I mean, I don't really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you and just do this. This is great.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you're doing this. It's this incredible privilege to come and kind of be part of you documenting things and talking to people. And I really enjoyed watching a lot of different things that you've done with like Ian. I haven't watched the Dick Hodgen one yet.
It's not out yet.
I will. Oh, I didn't. Yeah, that's why I can find it. But so I've enjoyed watching you do this as much as I've enjoyed watching you do anything else. And I think it's we are part of the Raleigh, Triangle, North Carolina continuum. I mean, it'd be kind of cool if you could dig way back and get guys like Tommy Redd on here if they would even do it.
Well, we'll have to. Now we've got you as the catalyst.
So anyway, thank you. And man, I hope that this thing, brings you much success.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But you guys have been watching the Jason Damico Show, listening to the Jason Damico Show. If we have any of Merritt's information in the description box, that's linkable. We'll have it in there, and we'll update it if there.
We'll put a Pony Express.
There you go.
Address in there. Carrier pigeon. You can contact me by carrier pigeon.
Before these cameras shut off because they're DSLRs. See you guys in the next one.
Thanks.
Peace.